Greetings, jocks. Welcome to another episode of JockJut, bringing you the action-packed Manhwa, Baek XX. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. Baek Yisu, a construction worker, is seen taking a phone of his brother, only to be interrupted by a mess-up caused by a ruffian of North Korea named Lee, who isn't so regarding of the South Koreans, which Baek Yisu is. And not just any South Korean. He is a unit leader of a special task force. He takes on the foe and eventually takes him down with ease and leaves for his men to clean up the mess. He goes to meet with his brother at a restaurant. Time passes and the construction workers welcome their manager, Chief Jang. Someone the men trust clearly. Not so welcoming, fires a bullet and is here to dismantle Baek Yisu's special unit. At the restaurant, between the two brothers' discussion, Baek receives a phone call from one of his men, Lee Xion, who informs about manager Yang's betrayal, leaving Baek Yisu in a shocked, frustrated state and soon lets out all his frustration as he's approached by a group of mercenaries, brutally put down, and not just by this Baek brother, but the other Baek, Dogyeong, who is the boss of the Taesan organization. The manager Jang already knew one unit wouldn't be enough. Chapter 2. Baek Yisu and his twin brother, Dogyeong, hit but not hurt, make a stop at this grand gathering, which is actually a funeral of his brother, set up by Dogyeong and his Taesan organization, in hopes to draw out the person who wants him dead. The plan works as the manager Chief Jang comes over, first sending his men, fierce as anything, quickly meet their match with Ha Jing-wong. Head of security, the immovable man, who doesn't even flinch, proceeds to batter the three. The manager steps out and talks his way into the funeral to offer his condolences, where Yisu will face him, disguised as his brother. Chapter 3. Yisu, acting erratically, punches the chief, asking where is Yisu, to confirm Jang's suspicions. After the fiasco, Baek wants to leave, and despite Dogyeong's effort to bring him to his gangster side, he leaves. Dogyeong sends Jeong to keep a watchful eye on his brother. The chief has his eyes too, being careful as he too has family. Back to Dogyeong, who with his secretary Suma is ambushed by two men in the dirtiest way possible, but of course they are punished by the gangster himself. But celebrations will have to wait as another gets his way with Dogyeong, stabbing him while Dogyeong can only rip his face mask off. Chapter 4. The disguise is off. Dogyeong is ready to fight this unknown figure. The two exchange. Meanwhile, Baek Yisu and Jeong take on their own stalker, who is no other than Lee Xion. Yes! He survived. Back to the fight, and it seems Dogyeong's wound is wearing him down. The assassin, taunting him with his questions, to which Dogyeong cuts his hair, claiming that he indeed is the Baek Yisu, and continues to embarrass the menace, standing tall over the scared assassin, for he finally collapses on him because of his wound. The real Baek Yisu arrives. The killer runs with a smile, thinking he took down Baek Yisu. Things aren't looking good. Chapter 5. Back at the office, someone has to fill in as acting president, but even an emotional Jin Wong refuses, saying there's no organization without Dogyeong. Meanwhile, Taiwan, the CEO of T1 ICT, is ready to take on Taesan after learning of Dogyeong's demise. Baek Yisu is hell-bent on finding out who did this. He locates an old friend who sadly met the same fate as him. His team killed off. He warns Baek Yisu of Chief Jang's influence before he dies. Taiwan's attacked Taesan, as has Jin Wong standing in his way, ready to take on everyone. Baek Yisu emerges from the same crowd, standing with Jin Wong, asking to take Taizan to avenge his brother, proving himself by slamming Taiwan and forcing him and his men back. Jin Wong acknowledges this and tells Yisu the only way to take Taizan is to become Baek Dogyeong. Chapter 6. Seoul's police chief Cho Mong-won-hoo isn't really happy with Chief Jang's methods. Jang obviously has his own motives and shows the Seoul chief who the real boss is, demanding to see Baek Dogyeong. Back to the Chu Hui General Assembly, we are introduced to Ryo Tae-yong, boss of Gyorang, Han Hae-sang, CEO of HHS and boss of Gangnam area, Cha Yuhwa, leader of Gurugu Chinese, and Yi Sang-min, Yilhit Capital CEO, leader of Gudo. All decorated heavy hitters, happy on the rumors of Dogyeong's death. Sadly, their happiness is short-lived, as they are left shocked, seeing the man himself, Baek Yisu, impersonating his brother. Well, with his easygoing attitude and intimidating aura, announcing that he won't attend the meetings anymore and tells them to do whatever the hell they want. Of course, the exit isn't going to be easy, surrounded by Ryo Tae-yong on their way out as he punches through Baek's window, saying, "Bring me Taizan." Chapter 7. Baek Yisu wanted to draw out the wrath of General Assembly, which is why he exited like that. That's where his suspicion of Ryu start to emerge, but soon even Sang-min, the leader of Gudo, enters with Choi Chong-ho, an elite of the Gudo, also mutual Jin Wong. Sang-min takes Baek with him to a place. An awkward exchange takes place, which leaves Baek confused. Even Ha Jing Wong is startled by what Chong-ho hints. Baek, stopped and greeted by Gudo, leaves him furious. He calls the rat out in Sang-min and steps out to deal with this. As exclaimed by Ryo, only the strongest can rule the streets of Seoul, and if anyone can step up to the gruesome Gudo, deserves to be the one on top. Chapter 8. Sang-min, indeed a rat, was seen with the Seoul chief Cho Moo-ho, igniting him against Taizan. Baek, on the other hand, beats down one of the Gudo and threatens to kill all of the 9 knives. A brutal exchange occurs. Both Baek and Jong-ho take a beating. To even up the odds, Lee Cheon kicks it off to aid his boss. Baek bounces back hard, dislocating joints left and right, till finally Sang-min steps out to talk, as he knows that this is in fact Baek Yisu. Chapter 9. Sang-min catches up on Baek Yisu, as he knew Baek Dogyeong wasn't an aggressive and formidable. Sang-min offers a negotiation. The name and reasons to why Baek Dogyeong was killed in exchange of Taizan's alliance. Baek Yisu refuses. As he states, he can't trust people who killed his brother and colleagues. He puts his knife on Sang-min, ready to take him hostage and forcibly take Yilak. But Chong-ho steps in and offers himself instead. Jing-woo, after many reasoning, saying that this isn't what Baek Dogyeong would do. Yisu yields and agrees. Back at the office, Baek Yisu looks back at memories from 5 years ago. His old days, his squad, and how the Chief Jang was by his side. Chapter 10. Chief Jang asks Chief Chong-ho if his job with the General Assembly is done. He doesn't worry too much, as he thinks these gangsters are amateurs, and talks about the One Sync project. Odd. Chief Jang is ready to meet the General Assembly. Whatever's coming ahead is going to be a mess. Baek Yisu, emotional after finding out the reason why his men and brother were killed. Jin Woo comes in telling that Chong-ho is under Lee Xian's custody. Having a good time, but Jin Woo won't be promising the same to Baek, as he's disappointed in Yisu. Saying this isn't how Dogyeong would have done things and throws down on Baek Yisu. An organization isn't built upon strength. If it was, that would be the military. And again, the military relies on strength because they can't trust anyone. With this mindset, Baek Yisu puts Jang Wong on the floor, saying he should have never trusted revenge of his brother with a gang. Leaves with Lee Xian, ready to make their own organization, built with skilled men and pros, promising to destroy the General Assembly in 1 week. Chapter 11. Jin Wong, a restaurant owner, is visited by a person 4 years ago criticizing his customer service. That man is no other than Baek Dogyeong, with a group of men dead under his hands. The trouble soon follows in the form of Lee Kyung-woo, leader of the HK Hook Sloans. Baek makes fun of his Hook organization and name, not resembling that of Captain Hook, so he cuts his fingers off. Jin Wong impressed, both ready for trouble. Jin Wong hands his hair tie to Baek to tie his hair back before the big fight begins. Same hair tie that Jin Wong wears on his wrist till this day. We see the same Lee Kyung-woo assembling Captain Hook even more and holding his 4-year-old grudge to take down a weakened Tyson. To his bad luck, they are visited by Boris, a Russian heavy hitter who Baek negotiated with earlier, is as menacing as the tattoo on his head, quickly disposing of all the HK Hook's loans before he's stopped by Lee Xian, forcing the leader to surrender. Unfortunately, Lee won't be able to stop Baek from visiting another, even more threatening friend, or foe, known as the Steel Weasel. Chapter 12. Lim Jeong-chun, Steel Weasel, an agent on the run, face to face with Baek Yisu, was trained as a soldier in the Gaisong factory by Major Wu Chang to infiltrate the South as slaves. But the taste of capitalism became too stimulating for the young Rim, as he's treated well by an old man who always offers him sweets on his way here. He builds a bond so strong he actually kills his own comrades who threatened the old man and his way into the South. Baek, who kept a watchful eye on him from the start as we see, offers the young assassin a deal. Next, we are taken to the Red Crown Hotel, where Ryu Tae-yong is infuriated over the news of his 3 hotels shutting down in one night. Even more so when he learns that Tyson disposed his HK Hook's loans group. He doesn't waste any time heading for Tyson, but on his way he meets Chief Jang, along with the familiar-faced assassin, threatening Ryo Tae-yong if he doesn't comply with him. Chapter 13. Chief Jang pulls out his gun. Considering gangsters like Ryu nothing more than amateurs in need of pros, so he hands him the One Sing project proposal, which in Ryu's words is too good to be true, as he rips the proposal in half, demanding trust and the credibility behind such manpower, who Jang considers as pros. The pair continue their manhunt, Baek bargaining through men while Lee Xian waits for deadline, the biker pro known as the errand boy. Baek is greeted warmly by Kim Axe of the Axe Knight group. With him, 2 highly trained military men who even give Steel Weasel a challenge. Kim tells Baek that these men will raid Tyson too. Steel Weasel, after being promised twice the reward, cuts through those 2 with ease, clearing a path for Baek. He catches whiff of Jurang and Chief Jang's involvement. Baek is halted. Chapter 14. Deadline. The errand boy, someone Lee Xian was supposed to rendezvous, is insistent fighting Baek Yisu, who assumes Chief Jang has already come into contact with. Deadline was part of a special task force incorporating Baeks to tackle the conditions in Afghanistan. Lethal as anything, tactically taking on Baek Yisu and not coming slow at all. Meanwhile, Tyson is being attacked by Gyorang's men, led by Chief Jang's very own Park Chung-hoon. brutally putting down every and any man till he meets his match, with Choi Chong-ho happy to help Jin Wong. Chapter 15. Park draws his first blood. Both Chong-ho and Baek are having a hard time. Baek especially overwhelmed by new tactics. Before things get even messier for Baek, Jin Wong out of nowhere comes in to aid him. Choi Chong-ho fires back, and he's fired back hard, holding Park's face in his hand, taunting him with the gangster's ideals that grants them the drive to put down pros like Park, putting a brutal end to Tyson trouble. Chong-ho's job is done. Now it's Jin Wong's turn. Without any plan, takes the biker head on and comes out strong, saying that they truly must become Baek Dogyeong.
Chapter 16. With deadline down and Ha Jin-woong saying, "We must become Baek Dogyeong." That savage moment unlocks a memory within Baek Yisu. 11 years ago, when a young Baek notices his brother ever so relentless, reckless, fearless, always looking out for the little guy. Relating with what Jin Wong said, Baek Yisu opens up about he always wanted to be like him. He asked Jin Wong what kind of man Baek Dogyeong was, and will he be ever able to be like him. Jin Wong, out of respect, goes down on his knees, ready to answer his question. At Tyson, Chong-ho's fight seems less likely from over. Chapter 17. Deadline stands up for more, but it is halted by a text from Gyorang to come to another location. He threatens Jin Wong for busting his headlight and simply leaves. Back at Taizan, Chong-ho fires back at the surprise attack. What looks like that he might have the upper hand. That thought is put to rest as the known assassin actually ends up breaking Chong-ho's arm in the end. Before he could put down Gudo's finest, orders are to fall back from Chief Jang himself, as Tae-hyung and Gyorang have something else in mind. Every one of Baek's men regroups at Taizan. The gang is all there. Lee Xion, Lim Yeong, Boris, Chong-ho, with Jin Wong, and finally Baek Yisu, along with Secretary Suma, resembling Baek Dogyeong as he's ready to take things forward the gangster way. And so is Tae-hyung, as Yulhak and the Gudu are next on their hit list. Chapter 18. Sungmin and the Gudu were attacked by Deadline and Gyorang. The already injured Guru stood no chance against the emerging threat, so instead the Guru focused on escorting Sungmin to safety, while the rest hold the threat off. Lee Songmong, after watching his demoralized young master and approaching Deadline, who cuts their escape short, steps out and tells Sungmin that he must stay alive in order or Yulhak to come back stronger. Sending him away while he holds off Deadline, Sungmin rarely reaches Taizan and begs for Taizan's help. He notices the nonchalant attitude, seeing a reflection of Baek Dogyeong as he has casually tells Sungmin that he helped him make his decision of who to destroy first in his mission to dismantle the committee, setting his eyes on Gyorang. Chapter 19. Lee Sungmin, remembering an wholesome memory of his grandfather, Lee Seogak, president of Ilhak Group, stopping him from smoking as he practices being the master of Ilhak, and remembers what he was told by his old man. That to be the best you don't have to be good at fighting, but the best of spirit. Sungmin is far from the master he was meant to be as he accepts the fall of Ilhak. Baek excuses everyone out and talks about how a weakened Yulhak will be of no use to them. Sungmin exclaims that being part of the committee, Gyorang will face the consequences for violating the agreement, but Baek adds, will they listen to a weakened Sungmin with the Guru no more? The tension moves from Taizan to CEO of HHS, Han Haesong, as he has the troublemaker Ryu Taeyong accompanying him. Han Haesong tells him he might have gone too far, but that's not far at all. He's went further beyond by setting the meeting at Lee Seogak's own home, disrespecting the Yilhak's name and having Gyoran's men ridiculing him as he steps in. He remembers his grandfather's words and realizes there won't be no more disrespect as he stands up for the Yilhak name with Lee Seon's help. He enters the meeting strong, humbling the cocky Taeyong, telling him if he smokes here, he'll be put 6 feet under. Chapter 20. In the dark times, Lee Seogak stood as king of Seoul, but after his failure to involve himself in politics, people under the rug tried to take a Yilhak to become the next best thing. A lot of blood spilled under the Gudo. To avoid further more, Lee Seogak gave business rights into 4 pieces and acknowledging the bosses above them. Chayua tells Taeyong that whatever he did was stupid till Lee Sungmin enters himself, shuts Taeyong himself. He doesn't hesitate, telling about Gyorang's assault on him, and neither does Ryo Taeyong hesitate on admitting what he had done. It's natural he had a trick up his sleeve, and the trick is a photograph of Yilhak with Taizan, connecting it with the assault on HK Loans and Gyorang's capital being ambushed, putting the blame on Yilhak, claiming they struck first, and looks to dismiss the meeting. It seems Baek already predicted all of Taeyong's moves in trying to dismantle the committee, so all Sungmin must do is be the boss. That's exactly what he does, shutting the claims of and playing it cool. Chayua isn't having any of it and summons her assassin Baek. Before things get out of control, Baek Dogyeong enters his team, surprising everyone, showing his support to Yilhak, appointing Lee Sungmin as chairman, and promising to tear apart Gyorang and warning the other 2, leaving his mark, till he steps out and meets a familiar face he didn't want to meet, Chief Jang. Chapter 21. Chief Jang has slowly started to be aware of Baek's resents as the tension between them keeps growing and growing. At Itaewon Hyunggu Loans, Lee Hyunggu, our beloved captain, Hook, is visited by Lee Seon to grab intel on the grounding Gyorang area. Naturally, he obliges under one condition. He wants to be part of Taizan. Gyorang is full of activity, as the Gudo's finest, including Dokku Yonggil, is held in captivity by Taeyong, who's here to break news of Taizan's new chairman, Yilhak's young master, Sungmin. Although Ryo Taeyong expresses how he isn't afraid of them, Dokku reminds him that Taizan has Baek Dogyeong. Chapter 22. With the help of Suma, Taizan locates the Gudo held in captivity. The plan is in play. Lee Seon Lim Gyeong, along with Lee Hyunggu, infiltrate the abandoned warehouse while Baek goes to Itaewon Motel and takes care of business by himself, till eventually Chonho joins in on the fun. The Deadly Alliance clean house. Chonho wasn't expecting Baek to be this devastating when dealing with a problem. It's not long till the two run into Gyo Chang, who admittedly says he escaped, but Baek suspects something's not right. Chapter 23. Baek's suspicions were true. Gyo Chang was manipulated by Chief Jang to betray Yilhak so that they, the Gudo, may be spared and be appointed as the rightful heirs to Yilhak. Chonho, suspecting the same, takes Baek's place and tries to reason with Gyo Chang, but it's of no use, as he's hell-bent on Chief Jang's bride. With no other choice left, Baek engages from behind and neutralizes Gyo Chang. Lim Yong takes care of things on his side and rescues Lee Somon, but Lee Seon won't have the same luck, as he's ambushed instead by the assassin in disguise. Chapter 24. Lee Hyunggu also makes his way to prove himself to Taizan. He steps up to Jang Man-seok, using his Gyorang tag to enter without anyone getting hurt or suspecting anything. There he finds Dokku Yonggil and gets him out. Lee gets ready to fight the unknown assassin and gives him a definite tough time. Baek, on the other hand, hurries to the warehouse with Chongho and Gyocheng as he suspects danger. Lee Sean continues putting the pressure, both dealing damage to one and other. But no matter how much the assassin cuts or bruises, he's not slowing down. Chapter 25. Lee Somong and Doku Yogil both help researching the others. They find Guangpao, while Lim and Hyunggu find Deokbae, who's having trouble staying alive, and so will the rest seem like, as Ryo Taeyong and Gyoreng have made it to them. Lee Xion was always fierce with a knife, having done countless missions for Chief Jang. He learned one thing from his last mission: no loose ends. He steps it up, injuring the assassin fully, almost ready to finish him, but before he could, it's deja vu for the assassin, as Lee Xion will have to go and finish this some other time and regroup with Lim and the rest of the Gudo in trouble. Naturally, the Ghost Squadron leader blitzes his way, makes it to the Gyorang without a sound, and demonstrates his ruthlessness as he takes the head of the Gyorang himself.
Shin binds the threads around Taehyung's neck and tightly clutches them, saying that his fist comes first as always, which is why this bad habit is going to get him killed. Taehyung angrily asks what this is, so he tells him to just consider himself unlucky that he was in a bad mood tonight. He tries to disarm him, so Shin turns around and kicks his knee from behind, remarking that he's a pretty feisty one and tells his lackeys to not move unless they want to get their boss killed. He calls to Parrot to get the wounded out of here, so he quickly gets going, inwardly in awe over how Jeorang's Ryu Taehyung's got subdued that easily, wondering where Taesun got a guy like him from. Shin tells Taehyung that people mostly say things like this in these situations and shouts out for people to make way or else he'll gut their boss like a pig. Suddenly, another guy slashes the threads from behind and attacks Shin, who dodges in alarm before saying that he's got a lot of words for a poser. He easily dodges Shin's strikes, calling them predictable, and slams his knee into his stomach before apologizing, confirming that was where he got shot and saying that it's a pleasure to meet him and that a lot of things make sense now if he's still alive. He asks if Taesun's boss is Baek Yisu, driving the dagger into Shin's hand, and orders Taesun to not move, remarking that his is how you use a hostage and that you can't just threaten others with their life, you have to make a show of it. As Taehyung angrily watches, the man says he'd told him to not be so half-assed before and that he should leave no loose ends before Taehyung rushes forward and kicks Shin in the face, asking the guy what he's babbling about before starting to land blows on Shin one after another. He asks Shin if he's the tout from earlier and tells him to try blocking this now before ordering him to keep talking like he was doing before and to keep pushing his luck as he agitatedly blocks his attacks. Shin quickly grabs hold of his arm, stopping another punch, and slams him to the ground, driving his knee into his face before starting to choke him, as he says he still doesn't get it and drives the dagger through his left eye, saying he made a show of it like he said and asking how it was. He tells the guy to make way if he understands or else he'll just kill him, but he exasperatedly replies that he should just kill him since they don't need a useless punk like that anyway. He asks the other lackeys what they're doing and orders them to go in, but they worriedly stay rooted to their places, seeing which Shin remarks that it looks like they don't want to and that their chief doesn't understand gangsters at all. He remarks that from what he understands, the world of gangsters is different than that of the world of them soldiers. People don't become gangster bosses by just being strong. The one they believe in is the one who becomes their boss. If he wants to play with them gangsters, he shouldn't leave any loose ends, and tells him that the rules on this side of the fence are different. The guy asks him if he thinks logic born from emotions can be called rules, and that this is exactly why punks like them make a mess of everything, inwardly saying that even if Ryu Taehyung gets killed here, all they lose is control over Jeorang, and disbelievingly remarks how a bunch of thugs will stay loyal to their owner. He tells Shin that they'll leave Taehyung and leave and that they'll play by their rules this time, addressing Taehyung and saying they'll talk later. Once they back off, Shin says he'll take out his eye for real later and tells Taehyung to try not to die before then and disappears. Taehyung angrily whirls around and starts cursing Taesun before the guy says they must clear some things up, which he agrees to as the two menacingly take out their daggers. As they leave, Jucheng and Deokbae emotionally decide to go to the young master for forgiveness. Meanwhile, the guy blows a smoke and tells tells Taehyung that he isn't bad. One could even say that he's got some talent. Gwanpil furiously curses Jucheng and Deokbi for betraying Ilhak and getting their friends and comrades killed before punching Jucheng in his face, saying he should have just ran and asking how he dared to come back before Chinho stops him saying it's enough. Gwanpil angrily asks him to let him teach them a lesson and deal with this trash, but Chinho repeats his words and says the task of passing judgment falls on the boss, so Gwanpil says there's no need for him to dirty his hands since he can just rip them apart instead before the guy silently sitting beside them stands up, saying Teeson will not interfere with the decision they make since it has nothing to do with it after all, even though they went through quite a hassle because of him. He remarks that betrayal is a serious matter, thus the outcome of this matter is entirely up to the president, handing him a long knife and telling the others to lay off him a bit since this isn't a matter that will be resolved by hitting him after all, which is why there's no need to make a show of it. The president looks at the dagger and says the reason for his betrayal is a mark of his own incompetence, which Chinho furiously refuses, but he gets up and says that is why he's decided to forgive him and will take back Li Jucheng as one of their own, which is what the old him would have said. Things like forgiveness and taking people back have been removed from him along with his soft, naive mindset which got Deokbi killed, so rather than judging him as the foolhardy Lee Seung-min, he'll judge him as Ilhak. The president calmly walks past Jucheng, seeing which he shockingly asks why he's letting him live, so the president says the direction on which he must act has already been decided by Ilhak, so he will now rebuild Ilhak as his sole objective. He tells Jucheng to never get in their way again since this blade isn't meant for cutting twigs like him. As he leaves with the others, he expresses that despite what he said, he feels terrible inside, so Chinho says that's fine since this is his Ilhak and that every action he makes from this point on is his will of Ilhak. As Yisu's standing on the roof with a cigarette in his mouth, a woman hands him a lighter, asking him to use this, which he thankfully takes, saying that he can't remember where he lost his lighter, and asking what she's doing with it since he doesn't take her for the type to smoke, so she replies that it used to belong to President Baek. Dogyeong addressing him with his name of Baek, Yisu hearing which he remarks that he hasn't heard his name in so long since so many people have been calling him Baek Dogyeong that he just got used to it, so he always finds himself thinking about these things. He must act as Baek Dogyeong to get his revenge and wonder about how he would act and speak in different scenarios. He wonders what his brother would say if he saw him like this, so she replies that he would have cursed him a lot and wouldn't be too pleased before President Lee walks up, so he asks what he thought of the blade, to which he replies that it's quite a sharp one, completely unsuitable for cutting twigs, hearing which Yisu remarks that he must have sorted things out. He readies himself to get down to business, but Chinho stops him apologetically before asking him to answer his question from before, hearing which he remembers how Chinho had asked him his true motive behind using Teeson. So he confirms that Ilhak once used to rule Seoul's underworld and made so much money that anyone would have wanted it, to which Chinho asks what he's getting at, so he continues and says the government deliberately tries to merge all the crime group into one, which started a series of events carried out by the man from before. Chief Jang himself called the integration plan Project One Sync, so Chinho asks what his goal is. Yisu says all he wants from Chief Jang is revenge since he took his precious family, and says there's someone held like them to meet and that he wants to act as himself in front of them. At a mansion, a police chief steps out of his car, asking what this is and saying there really must be a spirit here for a bunch of Georang guys to be gathered around Lee Seong-hyuk's home. As Chief Jang is calmly sitting in a room, a guy informs him that the police chief has arrived and asks what they should do, so he tells them to bring him in. As the chief enters inside, he mimics his words, calling it ridiculous and saying they must think that the police chief isn't such a big deal, and asks how gangsters can't even flinch at the sight of the police, so Jang replies that they're more of a security force and tells him to take a seat. The chief stares opposite him, asking who he is and saying it's the first time they've met, and asks if he's President Ryu Taehyung, remarking that he looks very different from what he expected and asks about the couple of scratches he sees on his face. Hearing this, Taehyung smirks, saying he would have jumped at him after hearing something like that and if he wants him to land some scratches on him too, so the chief takes off his glasses, telling Jang that this is problematic since it looks like they've already hit a rough patch and that they should set some things straight before starting. Jang asks if he doesn't want to work with gangsters, to which he asks how he's supposed to make a deal with someone who can't tell left from right, so Jang tells him to leave in that case since he's already told him before since they aren't here meeting face to face for making friends at all. He explains it's not about tradition or fighting or moving up the ladder and tells them to not make him repeat himself and to get down to business, while pouring them all a drink before asking which they should demolish first. As Lee Seung-nam solemnly standing outside a room, He thinks about his uncle Deokbi, remembering when he'd asked if he was the oldest when he was young. Deokbi had replied that he was the youngest, so he'd said that Chinho had told him that the older you get, the taller you are, and that he hoped he'd grow old quickly so that he could become as tall as him. Hearing which, Chinho had cheerily said he'd still be as tired as him, so he'd replied that Deokbi should become the boss since he's taller, which he's decided that the boss will be decided by height. Hearing which, he'd become flustered and asked what he was saying. In present day, he dejectedly says that he was still unable to grow as tall as him and that he should have stayed alive till then before starting to cry and asking who told him to become so small. As they walk outside later, Chinho addresses director Baek Dogyeong, saying he decided to come, so he answers that he considered entering but it didn't seem like the right time and that he's deeply ashamed of himself since he should have moved much quicker. But Chinho denies this and says it couldn't be helped. Dogyeong consolingly puts his hand on Lee's shoulder and tells him to let all his sadness out and stand back up, and that he's sure Deokbi meant a lot to him, which he agrees to. He introduces a Russian man, Boris, to him, asking him to let him follow around for some time since safety is their top priority. Meanwhile, Taehyung looks in a mirror and remembers his conversation from before where Jang had explained that they should let Taesun be for now or else one of their opponents will attack them while they're healing their wounds and overthrow Jeorang. So the chief had suggested Jeorang to make a parley with another party, Tianxing, since it'd be best to talk this out first, and asked if he intended to lose his head first. Presently, a servant enters, so he asks if they've brought the car around, to which he answers that Tianxing has requested to postpone the meeting because a guest apparently arrived. Meanwhile, a guy enters a Chinese restaurant and asks the waiter that he wants to see the boss, Cha Yua, and that he's from Taesun, but the waiter brings out some other guys with weapons, but a woman pushes them aside and starts fighting the guy, saying she's going to cut his tongue off. The war that started with the fall of Ilhak didn't just rope in the gangs of Seoul, the southeast region, which involved most of the foreigners from Seoul. That place was ruled by the Han people and the Joseon people and was home to intense conflict. During this intense conflict, the thing that bloomed in the battlefield was Tianxing. The man, Yisu, takes out his blade and acknowledges that she's the rumored untouchable from Tianxing, and isn't somebody he can take lightly. She remarks that that's how she likes it and tells him to come at her before a woman calls out to her, addressing her as Zealan and asking what's going on here. Zealan asks if she wasn't supposed to be at a meeting and how she came back so early, telling her to not worry about this since she's going to take the head of this unpleasant bastard, but suddenly gets stopped when the woman slaps her, saying she was asking about the situation and didn't ask what she decided to do. So Zealan says he was looking for her, which they don't take too lightly. She notices the waiter, Minxie's axe, and hands it back to him, telling him of how much they had to do to sleep soundly at night and how they had to murder their rival families and cut off the hands of their kin. She says he was a bit of a firecracker back then and reminds him of how Tianxing only takes up arms to defend their comrades, reminding him of the oath they had made. Seeing this, Yisu inwardly calls her Cha Yua, the head of Tianxing, who not only calmed down the untouchable and the riled up members but also completely changed the atmosphere, and that this isn't going to be easy, before cheerily addressing her, saying he would have died if she hadn't shown up for a few more seconds. Cha asks what happens and if he's alright, which he assures her of, and asks if she can spare him some time since he's come here to seduce her. As they're sitting in an office, he tells Zealan to lighten up since it was them who attacked him, which she apologizes for, admitting her misunderstanding, saying she was considering skinning him alive. Cha arrives with some drinks, saying he was talking about seducing her, but he's still talking to Zealan before asking what he wishes for, admitting she's got an idea but would still like to hear it from him. So Yisu decides to get straight to the point and says they're going to war with Jeorang, and asks which side Tianxing will be standing with, so she replies that it'll stand with whichever one wins, but he doesn't fall for it and says they're planning to attack the one that wins, so she asks what gave him that idea. He says no matter who wins, none of the two sides will come out completely unscathed, which is why Tianxing intends to attack them while they're still tending to their wounds, which is something he won't allow. She asks if he wants them to side with Taesun, but he replies that he just wants them to not attack and they'll do the same. Hearing this, Zealan angrily stands up and puts the blade to his throat, but Yisu tells her to not put the blade to his throat again or else he'll take his out as well. He tells Cha that he wouldn't have come alone if he wanted to blackmail them, and gives her a box which mostly contains rings, clarifying that it's a joke to Zealan before showing the USB inside it with the words "one sync" written on, and explaining it's the reason of this mess and behind his personal vendetta against Jeorang. Once he leaves, Zealan asks Cha what she thinks, so she admits she doesn't know and starts crying before asking her to be the boss, but she knocks her down and starts consoling, after which the two share a moment. Meanwhile, Minxie and the others are drinking at the restaurant when a car crashes inside, from which several men come out as one of them cracks his knuckles and proclaims that they're going to show them the power of Taesun. As Zeolan is silently sitting in the office, Cha says someone messing like that isn't, but gets stopped by her as she gets up and says this just goes to show that they can't trust Teeson as well and that she should have just let her rip him apart and kill him when he was here, but Cha replies that Teeson's also the one who stops things when they get too out of control, which is why it's hard for them to just think it's them here, shedding light on their badges and why they would have just come here wearing them so boldly if it really was Teeson, when they were thinking about whether or not they should join forces with Teeson. That man put on their emblem and arrived to attack them and asks if the timing isn't too perfect for a coincidence, which Zeolan acknowledges, agreeing that it's bad. Someone who didn't want them to join forces with Teeson attacked them and Teeson went out of its way to save Chunu. The timing's too good and asks if this isn't what people call a self-made play, to which Cha answers that she's still thinking it over. But Zeolan steps up, saying this isn't the time for them to do that and that they need justification, so she asks what her orders are, but Cha doesn't answer, so she angrily wonders whose orders they are supposed to follow, so Cha asks her to give him some time and asks if they should ask Mr. Wang, but Zeolan says he isn't their boss and that she's going to take care of Teeson her way if she doesn't give any orders. Yisu goes through the restaurant and finds a chipped, dull knife which he sees isn't one that people could use for combats or in military, but a normal one anyone can be expected to have. He looks inside the car and finds a 100 yuan note, wondering if it was a Chinese organization that attacked Tianxing, and why they would do so before getting on call with President Li, whom he asks if he's aware of the Chinese branch of Tianxing, who says they should ask Chunho about it since it's been around for a while, so Yisu says he can tell him about it later and wishes him luck for his business trip, who tells him to take care of himself before hanging up. A man lights up Yisu's cigarette and introduces himself as Wang Hao, the man who runs the currency exchange in this area, so Yisu introduces himself as Baek Dogyeong from Teeson while noting that he walked across a floor covered in broken glass as if it was nothing and stops him from bowing since it makes him uncomfortable, before offering him a cigarette nod, asking what he's here to do, explaining that he came to investigate a scene that someone orchestrated to make it look like it was done by Teeson. The man explains that he's here to investigate the scene as well, and both start from different sides before he says that Yisu's changed Hai's cigarette, explaining that a lot of things pass through you in currency exchange and that Yisu was a heavy drinker of the Marlboro Red, so Yisu says his tastes changed and messages President Li, asking about Wang Hao. He then asks Yisu if he noticed that his lighters dried up, who replies that he must not have been paying attention, before he tells him to then show him what he hid in his breast pocket and pounces on him from behind as Yisu turns around in alarm. Meanwhile, as President Li gets out of his car, he tells Chunho that Yisu was asking about someone named Wang Hao, hearing which a dark look suddenly passes in his eyes as he explains that he once worked in currency exchange, was an information dealer, and is bad news for people like them and Teeson since he's of the Black Dragon Triad and took down the Southwest as well as Teeson's leader. As Yisu and Wang Hao square off against each other, he remarks that he doesn't fight like a normal currency exchange manager, to which he asks if he really is Baek Dogyeong before he takes a small time out and receives the message from President Li telling him to avoid confrontation at all costs, so he relays it to Wang Hao, complimenting that his specs are quite monstrous before saying they should find out that the Black Dragon Triad is made of as the two rush at each other again. Wang Hao says that the truth is that it doesn't matter whether he is Baek Dogyeong or not, since from his experience, it's best not to trust someone who's got a lot to hide, hearing which Yisu replies that they can both agree on that. Wang Hao remarks that he must be feeling pretty confident since now's his only chance and asks if he's planning to run from the fight, but Yisu replies that he isn't because they still have to learn a lot about one another and that he'll now see what he's made of as Wang Hao rushes at him. He throws the glass shards at him, but Yisu knows it's a bluff and gets ready for the real attack, but Wang knocks the blade out of his hand, saying his grip's too weak, before catching it and driving it towards Yisu, who stops the attack, saying it's rude to steal from others, before deflecting the knife with his watch and slashes it across Wang's arm, who notes that he's changed his stance. As the fight continues, Wang jumps upward and tries landing a solid blow at Yisu's face, but gets blocked and remarks that he's really making him lose his confidence by blocking this attack. Yisu then rushes forward and surprisingly dislodges Wang's foot, who angrily realizes what he was going for and falls inside the car. As Yisu steps forward to deliver another attack, he quickly shuts the door and spots a crowbar lying beside him. When Yisu opens the door, he sees that it's empty before Wang jumps down from the roof and hits him with the crowbar, which he blocks again, saying he's swinging anything he can get his hands on, but Wang says the important thing isn't the weapon but rather how you use it before breaking the blade in Yisu's hand. Meanwhile, Zeolan angrily curses Cha while walking outside, while Cha helplessly wonders what she expects her to do in this situation before an old man slowly enters her room, introducing himself as the person who runs the mahjong rooms. Cha asks him what brings him here, saying she could have just come instead, but he replies that it's best to move around as much as one can in his age and that he came to check the place after hearing a commotion. Cha says they're fine at the moment and asks him to take a seat, which he does, asking where her aide has gone and left her all alone, so she answers that they had a minor conflict of opinions, hearing which he slowly repeats and confirms her words, saying she left because of that, before admitting he's not sure whether or not he should say something, but Cha tells him to speak freely, so he says he's been at Sionquan for 15 years and until the time of Tianxing being made and the rise of the boss, Cha Yuhua. He's been on the sidelines watching it all transpire, which she answers she's heard of, as well as that he helped out a lot. He says if she should look for a person, it should be the retired Mr. Wang, since there isn't a reason to suspect his loyalty to the boss, but that's just his own personal opinion. But he'd say that there's nothing more dangerous than a sharp weapon left unchecked, holding out his fake hand and asks if such a weapon shouldn't be disposed of. Later, he calls someone and introduces himself as Gu Changhan from the mahjong rooms and says the situation is worse than expected and the untouchable has left her post as well, which is why it's quite concerning that Tianxing is losing its stability. But Taeyong tells him to cut the crap and asks if it was his doing, saying he might have helped him place the finger there, but he's the one who pulled the trigger and now he comes here playing a fool. He asks who the person is who'd told him that he wanted to preserve the peace of Tianxing, and also said that he needed reform, before asking if the job is easier since the untouchable has left her post. Changhan says those were Taeyong's words, not his, and asks who knew that the job would be this easy, saying Zealan has left her post and Cha Yunhua is alone now, which is why today she'll die by Tisan's hands. Cha is thinking of the old man's words while calling Zealan and asks why she isn't picking up as she heads down the stairs. The other members ask where she's going with concern and what she'll do if the guys from Tisan come for her, but she ignores them and asks where Zealan, so one of them replies that she was going to rip the guys from Tisan apart, hearing which remarks that she's still doing whatever she wants and tells them all to get ready, saying they'll be heading to Tisan as well. As they're walking, she inwardly says the previous attack was too cowardly and underhanded to be the work of Tisan, since they wouldn't have revealed the One Sync project to begin with if they wanted to boldly attack them from the start, which is why their top priority right now is to stop Zealand, since attacking them right now will only complicate things. As they head outside, some guys wearing clothes over their faces approach her and ask where she's going, saying a grown-up girl like her shouldn't be wandering around at night, and if they should escort her. She asks if they'll be able to handle her, and they arrogantly answer that they will, before one of her guys angrily rushes forward, asking who they're running their mouth at, but someone from Tianxing clubs him on the head and addresses Cha, asking her to please step down because this is all for the sake of Tianxing, as the traitors and the other masked men surround her and the faithful members of Tianxing. Meanwhile, Wang knocks away half of the blade on Yisu's knife, saying it seemed like he really cared for it. He goes forward to attack Yisu, who dodges before Wang swaps the bar to the other hand and smashes it towards his head as Yisu realizes the style is Zealand's. Wang sees that he was able to block it with his shoulder and remarks that he's definitely above average in skill, so Yisu holds up the knife, saying he can take him on with even this. Wang starts laughing and repeats his words and says even though he acknowledges his skill, that's pretty damn cocky of him. He says he lacks objectivity and asks if he doesn't know about himself, transferring the bar back to his right hand. Yisu repeats what he said and agrees, saying there are times where he fails to understand and doesn't know about himself, and takes out a long dagger from behind and proposes something, saying he's going to start doing this his own way, so he better try his best to stay alive. Wang asks what he's babbling on about before barely dodging an attack and getting pushed back as he blocks one attack after another, admitting that his movements have become swifter and even sharper than before, and suddenly gets struck by getting kicked at his chin from Yisu's knee. He blocks another rapid attack, admitting he can't stop all his moves, which is why he'll let him get through. He pushes the club back, saying with this attack he'll, but suddenly gets cut off as Yisu finishes the sentence, asking if he'll end it before dislodging his balance with his shoulder and ankle and slamming him down hard. As Yisu's posing the knife over him, Wang alarmingly asks if he calls himself human, saying what he sees is only an evil spirit wearing the mask of a human. As Yisu's almost driven the dagger into his face, someone hurriedly calls for him, saying they want him there as soon as possible. It's completely messed up and has turned into a full-blown riot. Wang gets up in puzzlement, saying a riot doesn't make any sense and asking why Tianxing would ever riot. Meanwhile, as the members of Tianxing hurriedly fight the attackers, one of them tells Cha that she needs to get out of here right now and tells the others to clear a path for her to get out since it's the top priority. Cha looks in shock as they tell her to get out and urgently ask where Zealand is. Someone answers that they still haven't been able to contact her and walk her out as she notices the old man smiling on the rooftop as he apologizes to her, saying Tangxing will regain its stability with this. As Cha is miserably asking where Zealand is while holed up in a room, someone knocks from outside and she opens it to see Yisu, who says she can either face him and die or walk across this sea of blood with him, and tells her to decide. 10 years ago, someone asks why they brought them to an abandoned place, so Wai Chang-ho explains that Ilhak has announced that he'll be distributing the rights to Korean organizations, which means that there is no place for outside forces like them to step in. Here Korean organizations will take over the business in the southwest, and asks if that means they're telling them to leave. Ku Changjin angrily slams his fist down, saying they're going to did all the work just for someone else to take the reward. Wang Hao, head of the Black Dragon Triad, says that's why he called him here, and that there is a way, so Changjin asks what he's thinking. Wang says the Chungwon store was one of the businesses in the southwest area of Ilhak. However, Ilhak collapsed and they went bankrupt. Even the boss couldn't find where it was, which is why they take over the Chungwon Trading Company and are trying to manage the business jointly. Changjin asks what they'll do of the boss and that it wouldn't be any different if one of them did it. Wang says he found Chungwon's daughter or descendant, to put it easier, who'll be the new boss and is 19 years old. Changjin says impossible since she's too young before Cha Yunhwa enters the room and introduces herself as the president. Wang says they'll change the name to be global as well and dismisses Changjin's concerns, saying he'll take good care of her to make sure Chungwon never falls, and tells Changjin to not worry so much. Back in present day, Cha goes to grab Yisu's held out hand but stops and stands up herself, saying she can at least do this much. She looks at the bodies littered around the corridor in shock and asks if all this was done by them three. Yisu asks where Zealand is since this place is in such a condition, suddenly reminding her as she goes to call her before an injured man says he got lucky, and that he should have killed them all today, and that the innocent Baek XX will probably die without its owner today, which she reacts to in shock. Meanwhile, as they're driving, Zealand asks the driver how long it'll take for them to get to Tison and if they have to sit like this since it's cramped, telling the two guys sitting next to her to get out and ride in a different car. They apologize and say the car behind them is full as well, so she tries pushing them out, telling them to run in that case, so they ask her to please hold out a bit longer since they're almost there. The guy in front remarks that she's unusually sensitive today and asks if something happened with the boss, so she shuts him up, boldly saying nothing happened, but they all understand that something has happened. The guy asks if she told her this and says they'll be the ones getting punished. He asks if she got angry without thinking, but she replies that the boss is acting really frustrating. The others say she's planning something, but Zealand replies that's just indecisive, and that it's the subordinates who live or die following the order, so she should give them the order to live or die. She says they have to become an organization that follows his decisions, so they should either stop her or kill her. The guy asks if she thinks everyone will like that. She sighs and remarks that she's dull and says they've been going in circles for a long time before getting ready to take her blade out, but the guys beside her grab her hand and the one in front punches her in the face. She tells them to hold on tight unless they want to die, and the driver says they don't want to die, so she kicks him in the face, causing the car to crash as she smashes the two guys holding her into each other and remarks that they'll make good cushion. As the car comes to a stop, she gets out and starts beating up all the people that get out of the other vehicles behind them, menacingly declaring she's Baek XX of Tangxing. Wang says it took 10 years for them to approve outsiders like them as one of Seoul's major organizations and for them to take control of the Southwest District, under the guise of Chungwon. They shed blood, sweat and tears to make it this far, and asks what Changjin what the hell all this is, as Changjin's sitting on the ground, heavily injured with his fake hand lying nearby. He asks Wang to hear him out since Chungwon's done for anyways. Wang tells him to not give him all this. Changjin asks if he knows that the government's meddling in their affairs with Project One Sync, a project that will give the government control over all the shady businesses and how they're divided. He says the world's changing. Every shady organization will fail, and Chungwon won't be an exception since everyone will swallow it whole in the absence of the General Assembly, so they should team up like before. Wang grabs his outstretched hand, repeating that every organization will fall and Chungwon won't be an exception, hearing which Changhun starts convincing him before he asks how he can possibly think of something that's stupid, crushing his fingers. He says he remembers the words Changjin said to him 10 years ago, that it's just a little girl's organization, and asks if he remembers what he said, repeating that Chungwon will never fall. It's the most brilliant flower that blooms at night and the most fierce poisonous flower. He holds a blade against his hand and cuts a finger off as Changjin desperately tried to plead with him. A week later, Shin asks someone standing beside him if he got it wrong and says he thought they helped Chungwoon, but these guys look ready to stab them if something goes wrong. The man says their boss was ambushed and several of their own turned out to be traitors, which is why they need time to make the decision of whether they'll become friend or foe. In a room, Wang says he must first apologize, saying their boss was going to come attend this meeting with Tison, but due to some personal circumstances he had to come in her stead. Yisu says the free currency exchange manager came instead and asks whether he should take it as a joke or as the fact that he's the one who holds the power. Wang laughs, saying the conversation won't take this long if he takes it like this and that he'll get straight to the point then. He asks if they would like to work together with Chungwoon. He says they've figured out the series of events with Project One Sync and will hold hands with Tison. Yisu says that's not something he can decide by himself since Tison is an affiliate organization of Ilhak. Wang says they've already figured everything out and that they shouldn't just involve the puppets. Hearing this, Yisu says it's been bothering him for a while and asks if he wants Tison to be under Chungwoon. Wang remarks that a young man like him shouldn't be so narrow-minded and tells him to look beyond the picture of Chungwoon. Meanwhile, Zealand slowly walks through the reigning hall and asks the Tianxing men where Wang is, so they tell her that they're inside before the guard with Shin gets in front of her and asks her to refrain from entering since their boss is inside. She takes out her dagger, asking who he is to boss them around in her own house, and ignores his comment of being patient, so he starts taking off his coat, saying he sees that their fight is inevitable. Shin tells him to just let her in, asking what the worst is that she could do other than throwing tantrums and spouting profanities, hearing which she lodges the blade beside his head in the wall, saying she'll knock out his other arm as well. He asks what other arm she's talking about as he holds his dagger dangerously close to her stomach and says he got so scared that he was actually about to stab her before Wang asks Zealand what she's doing, hearing which she angrily walks away. Once Tison's left, she tells Wang that Cha Yua has disappeared. As they're going back, it's revealed that Cha is in the car with the guys from Tison as Yisu explains that Samhab's trying to get into Korea through Chungwoon and welcomes a pleased Cha into Tison. Meanwhile, Wang angrily holds up a wrapper, remembering that it's the same as the biscuit the kid from Tison liked, and angrily says this changes things. 10 years ago, a young Cha Yua timidly gets out the gate with her friends, asking if they're not here before they hear a voice and turn around in dread to see Zealand angrily getting out of her car, saying she knew she'd do this and asks if she didn't already tell her to get out the back gate and grabs her collar, asking if she's got to make detours to find her, but her friend asks why she does this every day, threatening that she'll call the police if she keeps doing this, to which she tells her to go on and do it and asks if she doesn't know about when and where to get involved. Cha says it's okay and tells them to go on, so they worryingly leave, saying they'll message her and to tell her if something happens. In the car, Cha asks her why she does this every day, saying she'd said the boss thing would be taken care of, to which Zealand replies that's what she's doing and asks what she's going to do if she really gets kidnapped, saying an 18-year-old girl became the official head of Chungwoon and what if there is an organization that really wants to kidnap her, asking if that isn't the perfect prey. She says the place she sets foot in is that kind of place, and that it's a miracle they see each other at the school gate, so Cha says she won't avoid her, and will listen to her, so she should try to at least be a bit nicer. In present day, Wang tells Zealand that Cha will be under the care of Tison since he found a wrapper belonging to the Tison boy on the spot, and asks if Zealand knows what that means, saying they're going to use her to get the upper hand in the Junseng meeting. He gets up and says now that the situation has come to this, they need to consider if Cha Yunhwa really knows the true worth of Chungwoon. As she arrives at Tison later, she tells the driver to go to the basement since they'll invade from the bottom. As they hurry out of the car with their weapons, Yisu asks her why it took so long and says she needs to consider the people waiting as well. He throws her the glasses, saying this isn't something that can be resolved through fights, and tells them all to drop their weapons. Once they've done that, he takes them to a room where Cha is standing. Zealand rushes in, asking how she got kidnapped, but Cha says she came here on her own, leaving her shocked. Chungwoon asks what she's doing, so Cha says she's tired of being the boss of Chungwoon and can't do it anymore. She says she always believed that as long as she was surrounded by Zealand and the people she knew, she could stay as the boss, but now she can't forget the gaze of how the people she once believed in looked at her, and asks why she came to find her and if she wants to kill her as well. Hearing this, Zealand is initially shocked before wrapping her hands around Cha's neck and saying that's a good thing. After taking care of the former boss, Chungwoon will take over the entire Seoul area before embracing her and saying if she forgot who Zealand is, saying she got abandoned when she was 3 years old and later decided on her as the boss. She says as long as she's there she won't let anyone touch Cha, which is her will and pledge, and that no one can break her or Chungwoon. Cha suddenly gets away from her and in disgust and asks what she's doing, to which she angrily asks her why she isn't checking her messages, so Cha replies that her phone's battery is dead. Meanwhile, Wang is sitting in front of Jiorang's representative, Ryu Taehyung, and team leader, Jang Sungho, to whom he admits that he doesn't have any information on him before Jang pleasantly greets him. Wang says their Chungwoon was attacked by Taesun not too long ago, and their boss, Cha Yunwa, was kidnapped. Jang says they'll definitely team up with Chungwoon against Taesun and asks if he knows of Taesun's two twins, Baek Dogyeong and the director, Baek Yisu. Hearing this, Wang takes his cigarette and says he's known for a long time that Baek Dogyeong had a brother but had heard that he died, since they even heard about what happened at the funeral. Jang says his twin brother was a member of their special forces and his skills were top-notch. The elder one was trained by the Yakuza and later became a gang member in Seoul, while the younger one became a soldier in the special forces. A pair of twins who led completely different lives but had one thing in common, which was their faces. Wang asks what he means, so Jang asks what if the Baek Dogyeong of Taesun wasn't him at all and was a completely different person in reality. Hearing this, Wang flashes back to his fight against him and asks if Baek Dogyeong from Taesun is Yisu in reality, which Jang says could be the case, hearing which Taehyung incredulously wonders what he's getting at. Wang asks why whether or not that person really is Baek Dogyeong matters to them, so Jang in turn asks if he thinks there are people who care, and slides a photo to him, saying they'll shake up Taesun and make it an even bigger mountain. Meanwhile, Zealand takes off her coat, ignoring Cha's protests, and telling Yisu that he can do whatever he wants and that she'll even become her lapdog if he wins, but they'll be the one that leashes Taesun's necks if she wins. Cha worryingly asks what she'll do if she gets injured, but Yisu tells her to not worry, throwing his dagger on the ground and says he'll go easy on her. Zealand rushes at him, saying she'll maybe let him live if he gives up an arm. As she swings her dagger at him, she asks if he thinks he can really win against Wang Hao and the Black Triad. As he keeps dodging, he notes her continuous wide attacks and changing of trajectory after swinging, noting that it's the same pattern as him before, saying he just needs to do it right. Zealand rushes forward and says she's asking if they're all ready before Yisu hits her square on the jaw and stops just inches away from another one, asking why she stepped away from the Black Dragon Triad for Cha Yunwa. She says ever since she stepped inside Seoul, her single objective has been to protect Boss Cha, so she's staying faithful to that order, and if the people over at the Black Dragon Triad are trying to harm her, they're the ones betraying their orders. She takes her arm back and swings her dagger at him, once again asking if they're ready to face against the Triad. He knocks the dagger away, saying it's too much for one person while dodging her oncoming attacks. But to do that, he's straightened and sharpened a ruined blade which has started to show its colors, the blades known as One Crane and Chungwoon. He grabs her leg and slams her down on the ground, saying it doesn't matter who's behind them because they are Taesan. At Incheon, a secretary thanks President Lee and Mr. Chunho for being here and takes them inside, apologizing that she can't say anything here in fear of an information leak, and asks them to go to the 6th floor, which is under construction, so they'll have to take the stairs and would prefer not to use the elevator. As she opens a door with her fingerprint, Lee wonders if the person behind the door really is him, which turns out to be true as they meet the real Baek Dogyeong lying on a bed. Chunho confusingly says Baek Dogyeong is back in Seoul, so Lee replies that is his twin brother, Baek Yisu, and this is the real one. Chunho asks about the funeral, asking if the person who died was Baek Dogyeong, but she says he did not die and is still alive, so he apologizes for his rudeness. She explains that Baek Dogyeong also operated under the Japanese name of Oyama Rugasaki, and that there were talks on if the Oyama Gumi should be allowed in Seoul, which is why Yisu had to take the mantle of Dogyeong. But if they find out about this, they'll take the setup bait by using their name. In the Tokyo Hotel Roppongi, a man hurries toward a pair of policemen, saying there were some screams from the top suite, and when he tried to go in, he was blocked by some men with a knife. One of them quickly understands the situation and asks which way it is, while the other asks him to calm down and show us the guest details, so the man hands him a file, saying they looked like Yakuzas, to which the policeman asks how crazy they must be to be in the middle of Roppongi, while the other admits it'd be easier if they were told about the guests first. They tell the manager to head down before one of them rushes into the room, warning everyone present to not move and to put down their weapons. One of the two guys standing inside arrogantly take out their knives and start walking toward him as his colleague addresses him as Matsuda and tells him to stop, saying they're Oyama, but Matsuda angrily fires into the ceiling, warning the two to stop walking as his colleague asks if he knows what he just did. A bloodied man named Oyama Shogo in a robe enters, holding a katana and asking if that was a gunshot before slowly approaching Masuda, who readies his gun, but his colleague quickly puts it down and says they received a report and were unaware that Oyama was residing here. Hearing this, Shogo says he won't make much of it and tells them to come inside since they received an official report. He sits down in front of bloodied corpses littering the room and says they were some third-rate, sullying the name before explaining that he'd talked about this with the higher-ups but didn't think about the other people living here, and apologizes, saying he got too comfortable even it is owned by them. Panicking, Matsuda asks why he's having a laugh, emphasizing that he killed people in a hotel. Shogo becomes silent for a moment before confirming that his name was Matsuda and ignoring his colleague's explanations of him being a newbie. He tells Matsuda that this is a hotel, which is exactly why he kills people here, since doing it in his home gets too dirty, and asks if Matsuda likes cutting people up in his home before walking away to answer a call, leaving a bloodied handprint on Matsuda's uniform. He picks up the phone and asks about Rugasaki before widening his eyes in surprise, asking what happened to Baek Dogyeong. As they're walking back, Lee asks Chunho if the Oyama Gumi is that great of an organization, so he explains that they're a large construction business on the outside and the most powerful Japanese Yakuza organization in reality. And the affiliate Korean organization grown with Oyama's support is Baek Dogyeong's Taesun, so if it's revealed that Taesun's boss is Baek Yisu instead of Dogyeong, Oyama Gumi won't sit still as well. Shogo gets out of his car and walks forward as Lee bows, introducing himself as the chairman of Ilhak, the current affiliate of Taesun and the one who'll be greeting them in the absence of Baek Dogyeong. But Shogo nonchalantly walks past him, asking what he's saying and how a person like him is the chairman, telling them to get Baek Dogyeong to come out. Seeing this, Chunho angrily comments on how rude they are even if they're Oyama and when they hold the position of chairman at the organization, but Lee grabs the handle of a suitcase Shogo's man was carrying, stopping them and asking how a weak organization like them could ever compare to the great Oyama Gumi, and even more so, because of that, they've come to greet them so poorly, and that they'll be of aid. Shogo says it's not befitting for a chairman to have such a flexible neck, hearing which Lee inwardly says he'll give all of it if it's only his neck, but Shogo goes on, saying the old man behind him doesn't seem to know proper respect and instructs one of his lackeys to teach it to him, so he starts cackling and goes forward with his axe, starting to attack Chunho, who barely manages to dodge but still gets grazed before Yisu slams his head into his car, telling him to stop flapping about before slamming him through a window and menacingly approaching Shogo, saying this isn't Oyama's land and is his Taesan, asking if he understands that. The guard advises Yisu to avoid Shogo since he's too dangerous, and he answers that he's not going to have a different confrontation for now. But Shogo arrived to inquire about Baek Dogyeong's health, which means that someone leaked information related to Taesan and Dogyeong. He remarks that it's probably Chief Jang, planning to shake them through the Oyama Gumi, and must have confirmed his suspicions of him being Yisu and not Dogyeong after seeing Shin at the warehouse, and might have given his identity to the Oyama. But there are too many variables for him to come out rashly, since it'll be very dangerous if his identity is exposed, which is why he should avoid creating so many variables. As Yisu smashes the man's head through the car window and menacingly approaches Shogo, who addresses him as Baek Dogyeong, but Yisu corrects him, saying it's Yama Rugasaki, and asks President Lee to take care of Chunho since it seems like his brother couldn't wait to see him. Looking at him in amazement, Shogo inwardly remarks that it's Dogyeong, from his voice to the tattoos on his body, but asks himself why he's suspicious of him. He asks if that nerd is Yisu's chairman, commenting that's a bit disconcerting, even if he's a Josian bastard who got kicked out, and asks how an Oyama could work under someone else. Yisu annoyingly says that's not it and asks if he's going to keep pissing him off. He straightens his tie, saying staying in Japan just felt really awkward, so he left, and asks how he could stay when his elder brother was so powerlessly watching him. Shogo says he's the same as before, endlessly thoughtless and imprudent. Even when there are a lot of people watching right now, he can't be ignorant of the Oyama clan. Suddenly, one of his lackeys rushes forward, aiming a dagger at Yisu's throat, who remembers his name, Ishizuka Kaido, and says he saw him in the documents which said he was the assassin of the Oyama Shogo, and it's his first time fighting Dogyeong. He grabs his wrist, asking if he still isn't way higher in the hierarchy than him, and says he hasn't got any manners for meeting people before Kaido tries kicking him, seeing which Yisu notes that it doesn't matter if he's Dogyeong, meaning that they're still suspicious of him, as Shogo comments that he might have gotten mad because he was bad-mouthing him. Yisu says he can't take his dagger out if that's the case, and should hide his cards before Shin swoops in and effortlessly disarms Kaido, asking if he's a newbie. Impressed, Shogo inwardly remarks he didn't know people like that were in Korea as well, while Yasha steps forward to face the guy who Yisu had slammed into his car. Kaido breaks his arm to spin and slash at Shen with his knife, who manages to dodge but gets grazed on the cheek, remarking that he's one crazy guy. Kaido pops his arm back in, seeing which Shen asks if that doesn't hurt him at all before Shogo puts an end to it, saying he can stop now and telling Yisu and the others to stop as well, saying he was just joking around a bit as he felt a weird unfamiliarity since it's been so long since he's seen his little brother. Yisu puts hand away, remarking that the guy who never even joked once is now trying comedy before Shogo asks if he's got a light on him, saying he came here straight from the airport and doesn't have a cigarette. Yisu takes one out of the box and hands it to him. Asking if he picked up smoking while he was gone, Shogo answers that it's something like that, and that he wouldn't have known now that he thinks about it. Yisu holds a lighter, saying he has to come closer to light it, hearing which Shogo takes a moment before admitting he never puts a cigarette anywhere near his mouth, and asks if this lighter was with Dogyeong, saying he's been looking for it before confirming that Yisu really doesn't know and that Dogyeong would never put this lighter in front of him, saying he knows him the most before moving back, commending Yisu for his performance and holding his hand out to President Lee, who goes forward to meet it, but Shogo grabs onto him, setting his hand down on the car and stabbing it with a dagger, saying this was a courteous enough apology. Shogo takes out a handkerchief from his pocket, saying they've all tried to fool and dishonor the Oyama Gumi, which is why a folly like that must be paid with this, wrapping the finger in it. Yisu angrily asks what he's doing, and Shin says they should just kill him now since that'd be better, as Chenho angrily roars out Oyama's name. But Lee stops them all, asking what they're doing and what this indecency is, saying their guest is leaving, which is why they should courteously guide them out before bowing to Shogo, while tightly holding his bloodied hand and hoping they return safely. Seeing this, Shogo pats his shoulder, saying he must have misjudged him, and that he is indeed the master of the small mountain, before getting in the car, and saying he has a feeling they'll be seeing each other very soon, saying the same to the fake Baek Dogyeong before driving away. In the car, he calls his assistant Gunji and asks if his end got taken care of, who answers that they're taking a look at the events that transpired in Korea in recent days, and that things were more entertaining than they'd thought, explaining that there are two things. One, Baek Dogyeong had a twin who recently died and had a funeral hosted for him. Hearing this, Shogo says it all makes sense now, and tells him that that twin was pretending to be the real Baek Dogyeong here, who's probably dead now, before Gunji says the second thing is that the assembly controlling Korea's biggest underground powers has dissolved, putting it into a state of chaos where every gang is vying for power and is at an all-out war, much like those old kingdom tales, and that Taizan has surprisingly expanded their territory in the last few months and have joined in as Ilhak's affiliate, but all that just seems to be on the surface. Shogo says he's confirmed it himself, but they seemed more useful to him, so Gunji says Seoul in the current moment is a pandemonium of broken balance due to certain outside pressure. On top of that, Taizan's Ilhak has increased their territorial growth by their merger with Chungwon, and there's a third-party organization against them that has leaked information to them. Hearing this, Shogo remarks that he really is amazing, and that his father's Oyama's strategy and information section really is different. Gunji thanks him and says he'll get back to him after confirming a few things. He cuts the call and starts interrogating someone from Jiarang. Meanwhile, at Chungwon, Chang-hun goes to Wang with his men, saying they should attack the now weakened Taizan, but Wang explains that he has no patience and doesn't understand things, saying the Oyama personally came to Korea and had some friction with Taizan, which means that they're about to directly involve themselves with the streets of Seoul. Back at Ilhak, the secretary says Oyama sent them something and starts reading from a file which says the atrocity of betraying them that Tison has made until now has been fixed with the previous apology. However, Tison must be led by its master, which is why each of its decisions from now will be made by Oyama Shogo. And what they send along with this is a reminder of their mistakes till now. The secretary hesitantly opens the box and almost throws up, seeing which Chinho instantly becomes alarmed and looks inside to see Lee's bandaged finger. As Yisu is sitting beside the unconscious Baek Dogyeong, he wonders what he did wrong by putting the lighter in front of Shogo, and says he was really confident in becoming him since they're twins and should have protected his Tison, but maybe this is his limit as well. He apologizes to Baek Dogyeong, putting the lighter in his hand, saying he really can't become him after all, so he'll do it his way now. He gears up, putting on his clothes, and meets Shin, who asks him if it would be fine, addressing him as captain, so Yisu answers that it's rather refreshing to get caught, so they're changing the plan from this point on. Shin puts on his hood and mask, asking how far they're going to go, to which he answers that there isn't anything to hesitate about since their identities have been exposed, so they'll kill everything in their way, saying their first goal is Oyama, but telling him to leave Shogo alone since he'll take him down himself. Taisen, an organization with a name that means the Grand Mountain, but even if it's a grand mountain, they're the Oyama, so even if it's as tall as it says it is in front of the tallest mountain, even a grand one seems infinitely smaller, so bow your heads and revere the heights you can never reach. As Shogo is sitting in front of Lee, he asks if his hand is all right, to which Lee rigidly answers it is. So Shogo says the act of severing one's finger contains the right to apologize, and he's already received enough apologies, so between themselves, he shouldn't sit so stiffly. So Lee answers that he'll talk as well in that case, and says Tison is an affiliate organization of Ilhak, and so even if it's the Oyama, joining Tison's management is, and trails off. So Shogo answers that he'll perfectly fit into the chairman's chair, hearing which Lee asks how he can make him such an offer, so Shogo says he's heard enough of Seoul's present state, which is no worse than the Sengoku era, where everyone was busy tearing each other apart. He says he has no interest in this Seoul and just wants to leave the fame of the Oyama Gumi, so he'll have the fame and give Lee this Seoul, and that the Oyama will turn him into the man under the heavens of this battlefield. Lee takes a sip of his tea, saying that's a high word, but it won't be as easy as he thinks since Seoul's underworld is very different. Hearing this, Shogo laughs, saying he understands what he means and that it might not look as easy from his level. But they're the Oyama, so they can't compare their measuring stick to them. He asks if Lee knows of a Japanese monster called an Oni, a monster that is known to eat people and is the monster of the Oyama. Sometimes there are organizations that get too brash with the Oyama. That day, there was an ambush regarding their enforcer. On that day, the location was truly vicious because the 9 members of the opposing organization that had planned to ambush were all lying on the floor in pieces, but what's funny is that some of their fingers were cut off. As Hyungu, the man from Jeorang, angrily sits on the floor, he says he's seen all kinds of messed up guys in Tison and Jeorang, but that man isn't even human anymore, as the guy in front of him gulps down a chopped off finger, seeing which he revoltingly wonders if it's from one of the dead corpses, some of whose fingers are missing. Lee Hyungu crawls away from him, asking him to please let him live, but the man just grins and raises his axe before the door opens and Yisu enters, asking if he's inside. The man addresses him as Rugasaki in surprise, asking what the get-up is for before remembering and confirming that's his real identity, saying he doesn't want to do anything with the fake. As his lackeys approach him, one of them says he'd only heard rumors, but it's really true, and remarks that he looks exactly like Rugasaki. He takes out his dagger, saying he's always wanted to stab the face of their old Kashira, and rushing towards him, but Yisu turns his oncoming hand and stabs the guy's dagger into himself, shocking the others who rush at him, shouting if he dares to oppose the Oyama, but Yisu stabs his forehead with his dagger before effortlessly killing another one. The main guy rushes at him with his axe, but Yisu dodges and takes out the dagger out from one of the lackeys' bodies as the two start brawling, and the man remarks that he's pretty good and can do as much as Rugasaki. Yisu recognizes him as Onizawa Nobuhiro and says he saw him in the files and that he's the type to push through with power before being cornered, but he takes quick swipes and slashes away at his torso before landing a blow at his chin and ending it by stabbing him again, after which he falls down in pain. Yisu remarks that he only uses his raw strength and that his accuracy is too low before telling him to come again, angrily groaning that he's playing cheap tricks and to keep doing this, but Yisu punches him in the face again, after which the man angrily exclaims that he just needs to land one solid hit, but Yisu effortlessly dodges his attacks and lands a strong blow at his stomach, making him spill blood before the man tries another punch and apparently succeeds, happily exclaiming, but Yisu blocks it with his fist and asks if that's all he's got before twisting his wrist and kicking him away as the man falls to the floor and asks what the hell he is. Yisu steps forward and sits on him, saying he can't do that and telling him to wake up before driving a dagger into his hand, saying he's got a lot of questions for him. He says Oyama Shogo figured out that he wasn't Baek Dogyeong by the lighter and said he didn't know the meaning of the lighter, asking the man what its significance is and what it means, so the man says that's an item akin to the symbol of their Oyama gumi and isn't something Korean guys like him can use around carelessly. Yisu repeats these words and says he understands and that he'll take this from him, driving the dagger through and chopping off a finger before saying he needs to pay and confirming that something like this is a means of apology, remarking that if so, he's going to receive a lot of these from all the guys. The man shakily gets up, spouting abuse at Yisu and saying he'll make sure to tear him apart, running fall out at him, but Yisu easily slams him back down and tells Hyungu that they're deserting expediently, telling him to move, which he hurriedly agrees to, wondering if he's a grunt. Heading out the room, Yisu calls his secretary, Sua, and tells her about the lighter and its significance, so she answers that she'll go ahead and retrieve it since she's already at the hospital. Meanwhile, Gunji and his men watch her from afar, wondering why she's going to a hospital before getting up and deciding to go check for himself if that's the case. As she's going up, Sua asks about the meaning of the lighter and Yisu says it represents a symbol of the Oyama gumi and Shogo figured out that he wasn't Baek Dogyeong with this. Sua says she isn't very sure and can't verify it since she didn't really know anything about it other than the fact that it was something Baek Dogyeong kept on him at all times. She opens the door and says she gets that it has the Oyama gumi symbol engraved on it, but only director Baek Dogyeong would know what it means, but suddenly stops in shock, dropping the phone to the floor as Yisu asks in panic about what's going on as Baek Dogyeong gets up from his bed with a lighter in his hand and notices Sua, whose hands are clasped around her mouth. He says he was wondering who it was, but it's Miss Sua, and asks why it feels like they're meeting each other after a very long time, turning around to look at her. Sua steps forward and says it feels like that because they are meeting each other after a very long time. As Gunji walks through the hallways, he comes to a sign beside the elevator saying the 6th floor is under construction and instructing patients and visitors that entry is forbidden, seeing which he repeats the words and tells his men to head up, and he's going to look if there are any other entries, remarking to himself that she went out of her way in Seoul to visit this faraway area, and wondering if she has anything to hide before thinking of what Taesun would hide in a hospital right now, and saying there's nothing but that. As Dogyeong's lying on the bed, he repeats what she said. The assembly has disbanded and Shogo took control of Taesun. While he was gone, he tries getting up, saying he can't just lie down like that, but Sua stops him and tells him to not force himself, and that she'll call over a doctor so he should stay still, softly remarking that this is enough for now. As Gunji's men enter the 6th floor, they find the bodyguard from before saying there really must be something inside if the head of security at Taesun is here. But he ignores them and says they can't go beyond this point, but the men nonchalantly approach him, asking if he doesn't get the situation and if someone like him is thinking of stopping them Oyama. But he replies that even though they may be from Oyama, they cannot pass. One of them puts a hand on his shoulder and tells him to not overdo it and ask who he's seeking to impress, addressing him as Mr. Han, head of security. He says no matter what amount of days he tries to bark, his master won't even be able to hear him before the guard, Yasha, grabs his head, asking if that's what he thinks and slamming him down on the ground, shocking the other two who take out their daggers, asking if he dares to mess with Oyama, but he ducks and hits one square on the chest, seeing which the other one shakily holds his dagger and says he's going to regret this, but Yasha steps forward repeating the word and saying he's done more than enough of that because he was a dog who couldn't protect his master. He grabs the man's wrist and starts crushing it, saying he was the dog who couldn't bark as much as he should have in front of the master he needed to protect. The man falls down in pain and Yasha goes on that it's his time now and tells him to go on and bark, making him scream in pain. Gunji watches the scene from another corridor and meets two guards who say he isn't permitted to enter and ask who he is, but he swiftly pierces one's neck and stabs the other, saying they're lucky they're in a hospital since they won't die if they press down hard at the very least before taking the ID from one of them, saying he's going to borrow this. Entering the room, he greets Ryugasaki, who dully stares back. As Sua hurries with the doctors, she meets the guards who tell her to hurry to the director. She hurries inside in dread with Yasha and sees Dogyeong lying on the bed, perfectly fine alone. He tells her that Gunji came to visit him and nothing much, except the fact that they saw each other's faces and have complications on both sides. He asks if she has his phone, but she answers that it's with Yisu, so he tells her to let him borrow hers since it looks like he needs to do some organization. He gives a call to an old man, Oyama Tetsuji, the Oyama Gumi's boss, addressing him as father and saying it's been a while. Tetsuji says he'd heard some horrific rumors, so it seems they were false, but Dogyeong answers that they were true, and that Baek Dogyeong died, so from now on he's thinking of living as not Baek Dogyeong but Oyama Ryugasaki. Tetsuji gets up and asks why he changed his heart now, saying he's always thought of him as his successor, which is why he passed on his lighter to him, a token everyone will acknowledge, but the situation has changed now and many family members don't acknowledge him. Ryugasaki says he doesn't really care about who becomes head of the family, but Shogo crossed the line and should never have harmed his family, so all the guys who are against him, tell them to come to Korea where they will set everything aside and go at it with each other. Tetsuji asks if he's going to kill Shogo, so he answers that he will and cuts the call, after which Sua angrily says the first thing he does after waking up is declaring an all-out war against Oyama Gumi. He smiles, asking if she's worried and saying it doesn't matter who it is since they're Tisen, and now they've even got him just as Yisu rushes into the room, asking if Sua is alright and seeing Dogyeong before starting to cry, asking if it really is him, which Dogyeong confirms and gets up. Dogyeong addresses Yisu by his name, but asks if he should call him Baek Dogyeong now before asking if he's crying, to which he answers that he'd thought that he would become Dogyeong if he never woke up, so Dogyeong asks if becoming him was doable, so Yisu wipes off his tears, saying they were twins so he thought he could do it, but he couldn't and it was so damn difficult. Dogyeong says he's worked hard and tells him to let him take it from now, so he should stop crying now. Later, Dogyeong puts his arms over his hands, saying this is messed up. The Tisen he worked so hard to build has been handed over to Ilhak, and he kidnapped Chungwon's Cha Yuhua and did all that under his name, which is the most absurd thing in all of this. But Sua says thanks to him, Baek Dogyeong's image to the public became that of an unrivaled, super strong gangster, to which he sarcastically reacts about how nice that is before asking Yisu what his next move is, so he answers that they have to take back Tisen first, and that they'll go back, Oyama Shogo and his henchmen, one at a time, one after another, he'll cut them all off. As Shogo sits beside the man Yisu had chopped a finger off Nabu, he says he's been beaten up a lot, which Nabu admits to but says he can still move and is okay with this, so Shogo angrily grabs his collar, saying he should be able to and remarking how absurd it is for Oyama's Oni to be lying in a hospital. Shogo asks if the fake was as strong as Ryugasaki. Nabu begrudgingly says he doesn't know of Ryugasaki's skills since he's never seen them firsthand, but would like to think that he isn't any stronger than the fake, who was a monster from another world. Hearing this, Shogo madly grins for a second before saying he's disappointed in him. asking if he ate fear off the floor and became an ordinary man for being so scared by him. Gunji suddenly arrives and answers Shogo's question that he has found something but the boss is looking for him and hands him the phone. Over the call, Tetsuji asks what he's doing there and says Tisen was something he gave to Rugasaki. Hearing this, Shogo laughs and tells his father that he's a fake, a twin pretending to be Dogyeong, but Tetsuji says he's real and that he's confirmed it before telling him that fake just told him that he'll become the boss of Oyama and kill Shogo, to which Shogo asks what he answered. Tetsuji says he answered what he was supposed to as the boss and tells Shogo to come back to Korea, who angrily cuts the call before shoving the phone back to Gunji and asking if Dogyeong really is alive, so Gunji says he confirmed it was Rugasaki and found the third-party organization that leaked information to them, saying it's Seoul. As Chief Jang is sitting in his car, he inwardly acknowledges that Oyama took over Tisen and took Ilhak's Lee Seungman's finger as well and are inexorable, contrary to what he thought, which is why it'd be a bad move to let them stay in Seoul for long. But he can't just bring them in front of the board since that'll make them even more complicated enemies. His daughter, Hyuna, suddenly opens his car door and says she found him out and that he's smoking again and again even though he said he'd quit. He says she should have called him since it was raining and asks why she isn't sitting in front, so she answers that he smells too much of cigarettes. He says he was trying to do a quick smoke and air it out, but obviously got caught before Shogo suddenly enters the car and grabs Jang's daughter's hand, saying he's her father's friend or someone who will become a friend soon, to be precise. Hyuna flings her hand away and asks Jang who he is and what he's saying in alarm, so Shogo apologizes and says it seems she was surprised by him and asks if she doesn't know Japanese. Jang tightly clutches his tie and turns around with a forced grin, telling her that he's just an old friend. Jang asks how he found this place, to which Oyama answers that he's the one who called them over, which is why he himself came here to talk business but didn't expect that he'd be with his daughter. Jang asks if it wouldn't be better to talk business outside, so Shogo says he doesn't mind and to suit himself. As they leave the car, Shogo asks if they should start talking again, to which Jang takes out his gun and asks if he wants to die and if he doesn't know whose land this is, and says this place is completely different even if he's big in Japan. Shogo says he's saying the same thing as that fake guy, Baek Yisu, and confirms that he was his subordinate, addressing Jang as Lieutenant Colonel Jang Seong-ho of the HID Special Forces. He says he's investigated the things he's staging in Korea as well as his personal details before Kaido, standing behind Shogo, takes out his knife and runs it along the roof of the car, saying he seems to care about his daughter a lot but didn't cherish his subordinates as much. Shogo says he seems to have a vendetta against him and so does he, which is why they can team up and take him down together. Hearing this, Jang leans back and says he started out so grandiosely but just wants to sit with them in the end. Unfortunately for him, there isn't any place left in their table. Shogo answers that they'll just have to create a new one in that case since he doesn't like sitting with just anyone too, and that he'll show what the Oyama's capable of before turning around to leave, but Jang grabs Kaido and throws him to the ground before delicately cutting a mark on his face, telling him to not act out while the grown-ups are talking and reminding that to Shogo as well. Meanwhile, Taehyung frustratingly wonders what's happening while sitting in a bar. He remarks that Baek Dogyeong wasn't Baek Dogyeong in reality. Tisen's getting destroyed by the Oyama and Chief Jang isn't picking up his phone for some reason. Suddenly, a guard falls dead at the door and he turns around to see Nabu taking his axe out of the dead body. Taehyung says it's the first time they're meeting but he still turned someone else's guy into rags, although it does look like someone else messed him up first. Nabu asks if he's scared, making Taehyung, who's walking towards him, realize they're the Oyama and asks if they came here for a second bite after eating up Tisen. But Shogo walks past him and picks up a bottle, saying he should come down from his seat since it isn't befitting of his place. Meanwhile, Hyungu watches the two Baek Dogyeongs in confusion before Shin finally makes him realize that they're twins, so he asks which one of them cut off his fingers, and after finding out that it was the real one, decides to follow Baek Yisu from now and compliments Shin for being able to beat Taehyung so quickly, saying he was a light heavyweight boxer who was discarded after he gouged out an opponent's eye, but just a year after joining the underworld where he was employed by Ilhak. He became Ilhak's most elite. Meanwhile, Taehyung swiftly beats up Nabu and says he's gotten rusty since it's been a while before Shogo stabs his stomach, asking Nabu how he could fall against this mere ordinary man. President Lee tries stopping Kaido, saying he'll talk to them, but he kicks the door down to a room where Cha Yua and Zealand are sitting. He says boss ordered them to strike down Jiorang and asks why they aren't moving, but Zealand just asks what he's saying nonchalantly, so Cha translates it for her, to which she grabs her dagger, asking just how many bosses this organization has and which boss order it is this time. She trains the blade on Kaido and says they've decided on going with the Baek Dogyeong guy before he attacks her on the side of her head. She dodges it with her blade and asks if he just wants to go at it. Kaido remarks that she's too loud and asks what she's yapping about, but Lee stops them, telling him to please leave since he'll talk it over with them. He tells her that he gets her dissatisfaction, but she should cooperate with the instructions for the time being. Cha stands up, saying they acknowledge him as the chairman, but they join Tison for Baek Dogyeong and asks where he is. Zealand asks why he's acting like a dog in heat and says he was the chairman of Ilhak even before Tison, so where'd he sell of his pride to? Lee says Baek Dogyeong will be back soon and leaves with Kaido. As Nabu is breathlessly standing over Taehyung, Shogo asks if he's done and tells him they should get going, but Taehyung wearily gets up, asking who they're saying is done, and says Jiorang isn't just done like that. Shogo says he's heard half of Seoul's underworld is their organization's members and are being led by him. He swivels his head towards the empty hall and asks where all those members are and if they shouldn't have been there. Wolves follow the leader of the pack. However, with the pack slowly getting weaker and the leader losing their charisma, it's time to change the lead. His organization has already abandoned him, making him just a weak guy left behind who's no longer the leader. As Kaido exits an elevator, he sees Baek Yisu and Shin standing there, who start walking toward him. Shin starts saying something, but Yisu says he knows, remarking that Kaido apparently cannot feel pain. He was once an orphan, completely alone with no information of where he was from. Just surviving each day was a challenge, and to him, being unable to feel pain was perhaps a form of relief in some way. He couldn't get hurt from any wound he might have received, and maybe there was an evolution to not fall behind in this vicious environment. That is probably what Kaido thinks. He does not feel pain, so he is not afraid no matter who the opponent is. As Kaido takes his coat off and rushes at Yisu, Shin remarks that he's fast. Yisu and him start sparring, and Yisu knocks him down, twisting his hand, but Kaido aims a kick from behind, dodging which Yisu calls it an uncanny movement, and Shin remarks that the pain would normally have been enough to pass out and wonders if he isn't taking any damage. An irregular movement that ignores the strain on the body, and even joint locks don't work on him. Yisu says he really doesn't feel any pain, but that's probably the only thing he can't feel. He rushes forward and grabs Kaido's arm, so he punches with the other one, but upon drawing back, sees that it's broken. Yisu tells him to keep doing that, since even if he doesn't feel pain there's a limit to his body, and grabs his leg before smashing it down and breaking it as well. Yisu says he doesn't feel pain, so what if he gets crippled? As they're going, Baek Dogyeong confirms that Oyama is at Tison, and Yasha says it'll be bad manners to head there empty-handed, which is why they should buy something on the way, to which he remarks that he's gotten more playful. Yasha sarcastically asks if there's anything to worry about since Yisu went first, telling them to come through the front door, and that no one will be able to stop them. As they arrive at the building, Yasha says he'll assist him, and Dogyeong says he'd heard they received a lot of members and that it's going to be embarrassing to head in like this when there's so many eyes watching, dismissing the support. As Zealand and some Oyama guys are leaving in a slow procession, Shin suddenly rips one guy's throat before killing another one as well, asking who they think they are for ruling around at someone else's house. Seeing this, Zealand grins and cuts off a guy's arm who was taking his dagger out. She asks if their master is back yet, to which Shin points upwards. As President Lee and Chinho are in a room, he remarks that it's noisy outside. Chinho says it seems like they've started, and the two decide to greet them as well, while Yisu watches Kaido limply trying to get away, and asks if he can still stand before telling him to keep going. Dogyeong slowly enters, saying Oyama Gyumi say they're the highest mountain, but they're Tison, so with what measuring stick do they evaluate the height of Tison? Kaido looks at him in shock as he says if they're going to look at them, they should look up while crawling on the ground like he is right now. That is them, Tison. 2 months later, Zealand sarcastically laughs and tells them to look at these guys, asking if they're telling her that the older brother was crippled and bedridden, and the younger one acted like him the whole time, before asking if they've come so far all this time. Trusting the words of a guy who wasn't even the boss to this, Dogyeong says he shares their condolences regarding the situation in these recent days, but his brother has sufficiently fulfilled his duties as the deputy boss, and there is no difference in opinion between them, and he too is interested in continuing the relationship of Ilhak and Chungwon as it is now, and simply put, both their words are the same. Cha apologizes for Zealand's words but agrees that they decided to simply follow Baek Yisu, not him, meaning he isn't the Baek Dogyeong they decided to work with. Hearing this, Dogyeong asks Yisu what he did to her, but Lee calms both sides down, telling them to not get at each other's throats and reminds them of the important issue, which is that Oyama has taken over Jeorang, meaning that they're siding with Chief Jang and the One Sink plan. So Dogyeong says he's reminded of the assembly time to time, so they should just pop inside and bust the issue open, making who's with who clear. Later, Cha approaches a guard and says she's the representative of Chungwon, showing him a letter, so he courteously invites her inside but says that's strange since the representative from Chungwon is already there. As Jang and Shogo are discussing what they should do, she enters inside and says she's the boss of Chungwon, telling the deputy boss, Wang, to head back before Lee arrives and shakes hands with Shogo, who asks if they should begin now that everyone's here. Suddenly, the guard stops someone, asking who he is, so he introduces himself as Baek Dogyeong. He walks over the now unconscious guard and seeing him, Shogo calls his name in shock, but he gets closer, menacingly saying it's Rugasaki. Dogyeong says he's reminded of the assembly in a while too, and asks if it wouldn't be fun, so Yisu says he'll go this time, but Dogyeong takes the letter out of his reach and says he's going to go this time, reminding him what he'd said last time, that he'll handle it from now on. Dogyeong says he'd heard Shogo had a very sad goodbye and wanted to see his younger brother this much before asking if there isn't even a seat for him now, and sitting down on another table, saying he'll just take this one. Wang wonders if it really is him or just Baek Yisu acting and remarks it's been a while, asking if he's alright, but Dogyeong annoyingly asks who he is and why he's getting all friendly with him before suddenly remembering that he's the dude whose butt he kicked and saying he won't recognize him if he sits in someone else's place. Wang asks what he's trying to say there, so he pulls up a chair, telling him to come and sit here since they're saying the bosses are here to talk, so they should hear them out since it was getting boring sitting here alone. Wang agrees and sits down, asking if he has a cigarette, to which he answers that does, but tells him to not jump him like last time for not having a Marlboro. He holds the lighter for him, which Shogo notices before Dogyeong says there's a lot of different faces this time, remarking that they obviously got Jeorang before asking if they got HSS as well, hearing which Wang says he's a bit different this time. Shogo gets up and says he's tossed out the wolves and HSS seems to be preoccupied for now before remarking that he only called the bosses here and asking if he's the real one this time. Dogyeong repeats what he said and says he's talking like he was fake last time, so Shogo answers that it doesn't matter who its master is for Tison because that small mountain exactly fits the grave these two twins are going to be buried in. Dogyeong swipes away the cigarette stub he'd burnt out on his jacket, saying it's the expensive stuff, before Shogo sits back down and says there's a different choice as well. Both of them could show Seoul what the real Tison is, together with Oyama taking over Seoul, but Dogyeong tells him to piss off, asking if he didn't hear from father that he'll be the one taking over Oyama and will kill him with his own hands, before asking why he's acting so restless to kill him, saying he gave him everything before leaving Japan, so why is he messing around in Japan? Shogo angrily asks if he thinks they were some sort of toy he got bored of and handed down to him, and says they were already his from the beginning, and tells the others to listen closely as well. Tison will be ripped apart by his hands. If they try stopping him, they'll die too, so they should get in line or else he'll bulldoze all over them as well. Dogyeong starts clapping and says it sounds like a child's mindless rambling which he can't bear listening to, before telling him to go ahead and try it, but warning him that he'll die this time if he doesn't do it right again, and leaves with President Lee and Cha. Once they've left, Wang gets back on call with Chief Jang, who was listening the whole time, and says Dogyeong just seems to have a limp in his leg, so Jang tells him that he's got his guys already there, so they'll take care of it from now. As they're leaving, Dogyeong notices something and excuses himself to go to the bathroom where Jang's guys are waiting for him, so he tells them to do it properly this time. As a man enters a door, he remarks that the world's gotten better, saying back in the day, they used to have to crack open tuna bellies to get this stuff, but now you can just get hem delivered so openly, and that he can't wrap his head around these Korean guys. Someone else confirms that all these are legal, but he corrects him and says they're approved, not legal. Apparently they talk to the people higher up. Another guy says that still, if this sort of stuff is allowed in Korea, the chairman won't just sit idly since this isn't the sort of business he wants, but the man tells him to not worry about that since this is what Shogo wants, and they've decided to follow him. On top of that, he's heard the chairman has decided to move back from the front lines with both Rugasaki and the boss in successor conflict. The chairman has decided to seclude himself in his room and left the organization of the group to the management. And then Baek Dogyeong stupidly marched into the hotel, so he'll probably be turned into rags by now. After locking the door, he turns around to ask about the Korean mercenary soldier and Sishin and the kid, dismissing the two guys before Yisu arrives and asks what he was saying. Meanwhile, Dogyeong dodges the guy's attacks before stumbling, seeing which the leader, Park Chang-hun, says his injured leg is the left one and tells them all to attack slowly and calmly, not thinking of him as a regular gangster and to tenaciously wear him down rather than fighting head-on since he's their prey, so take him down. As a guy rushes at Dogyeong, he punches him before another one grabs him and tells his partner to pound him, but Dogyeong slams them into each other and takes out his dagger to fight Park Chang-hun, remarking that he's awaiting his movement and will look for a critical moment, but the same goes for him as well. Meanwhile, the man says he's seen him before, calling him Baek Dogyeong's twin, but saying he shouldn't have come here now because trained soldiers from Korea have been sent to the real Baek Dogyeong to get him. Yisu repeats his word and says he seems pretty confident, so the man says even Rugasaki won't be able to fight them with that crippled body. Shin suddenly supports Yisu, telling him to just stay downstairs, but he replies that this guy is stepping way over line and asks him if he thinks Baek Dogyeong is doable, revealing that he's Baek Dogyeong or Lee Rugasaki. The real Yisu repeats what they'd said before and says the ones looking for an opportunity from the start was them, as he slashes through the guys, seeing which Park Chang-hu remarks in shock that he jumped forward with his left leg as Yisu stabs two guys at the same time and slams another one down, saying you're the ones who've caught up since they're the ones hunting. Park realizes his Yisu and disbelievingly asks if this was an act from the beginning, so Yisu answers that everyone learns disguised infiltration, after which Park talks into a telecom and tells them to send Alpha in for support, calling himself Beta before telling the other guys to clear out since Alpha is coming. He tells Yisu that he too knows that he was a legend in their scene and earned himself a devoted fan, although he's a bit messed up in the head. Alpha tells Park to piss off and asks if this is for real, saying he should be dead since he killed him that time, hearing which Yisu annoyingly screws up his face, asking if he's the one who did that to his older brother. Alpha, whose ghost in question, asks if he killed Baek Yisu then, so Park tells him that he's Yisu, so they should take him down together, but Ghost says there's no way since he killed Yisu before Yisu kicks his face, as Ghost inwardly remarks that he has to be the one to beat Baek Yisu. Ghosts, with no real form or existence, something that is imaginary, the Ghost team consists of such beings who cannot even leave their trace in this world, as G1 confirms that the target is dead and that they're exiting the site. He tells them to incinerate it all, after which G2 takes off his mask in relief, but G1 tells him to put it back on, reminding him that they leave nothing behind, so he wearily complies but takes it off again in the car, remarking how harsh G1 is despite the fact that they completed the mission too and are alone in the car. Suddenly a car crashes into theirs. In the overturned car, G1 hurriedly wakes G2 up as the guys who ambushed them start firing. G1 takes off his mask and gets out, holding a dagger in his hands, with G2 behind him as they start attacking before G2 takes the last guy out, saying they're gunning them down out in the open, and asks G1 if he's alright, so G1 answers that he's alright and tells him to not leave any traces by incinerating them all. As they're standing in front of the burning car, G2 apologizes for not getting G3 and G4's names before noticing G1 smoking a cigarette and asking what happened to leaving no traces. He tells him to not be so harsh and to let him have it since it's his last, as G2 notices the trail of blood going down his leg. He says they should get going quickly, but G1 tells G2 that he'll be the only one leaving since he'll be tracked quickly if he leaves like this, and asks if he forgot, reminding him that they leave nothing behind before walking into the burning wreckage, after which G2 starts screaming. Chief Jang later says the mission was a success and all team members died on site except G2, saying he did well but the mission was leaked somewhere, which is probably because of them being a team. He says from now on, G2 will just be Ghost, hearing which Ghost slowly takes his dagger out before a man enters the room, saying Baek Yisu is back but is under suspicion of being a spy and has been questioned for multiple days, so Jang tells him to bring his uniform since he'll go there himself. Ghost asks who this guy is for him to be acting like that, to which Jang tells him that he's different from Baek Yisu, with the usefulness being completely different. He learned of this later, the existence of Baek Yisu, a living legend who was allowed to exist unlike them who were told to leave no trace. As Ghost reels back from the kick, he asks Park if he said his name was Beta and if he doesn't have a name either, to which Park says that's just a code name and tells him to come to his senses, but Ghost tells him to not worry since getting hit there made him come back to his senses. He tells him to get the guys to cut the lights from the lobby to these restrooms, and once that's done, tells Baek Yisu that he'll show him the power of the Ghost team. Yisu remarks that he can still see flashes of his blade before Ghost catches him off guard from the side. Dogyeong asks if they really have to do this and why they're doing this when everyone has been caught, so Yisu answers that since they've been caught, he's trying to take advantage of it. By now, Chief Jang must be convinced that both he and Dogyeong are alive, so anyone who sees them from now will try to kill them. So considering that Dogyeong's body isn't in perfect condition, they'll try to come after him, which Dogyeong agrees with, since even if they go after Yisu, he'll easily take care of them. So Yisu says this is why he'll pretend to be him and become the bait, to which Dogyeong asks about what happened to that guy. Yisu asks who he's talking about, so he clarifies that it's the guy who killed him while they're still on the topic, and asks if he knows who he is, saying he gave him a pretty scar. Shin realizes that he's talking about the gray hair and says he smashed him with a harpoon. Hearing this, Dogyeong asks if his skills weren't average and says he'd heard that he beat Taehyung too, which Shin agrees to, so Dogyeong answers that he still should have finished him that time and let his guard down, but Shin tells him he was surprised as well, since they're all trained professionals like them and only know how to eat and kill. Remembering how he was able to match him because they received the same training, but he had incredible fighting sense, so it wouldn't be strange if he'd lost to him. He tells Yisu to be on guard against him and not let his guard down, after which Dogyeong asks Shin what Yisu's specialties are, so Shin says he doesn't have any, but if he had to choose, it'd be annihilating such specialists. Ghost attacks Yisu from the side, but he slams him down on the floor while twisting his arm and gets ready to stab him, but Park suddenly kicks the dagger away, so he grabs Ghost's dagger and uses it to block another attack. As the two fall back, Ghost asks Park if he's trying to be helpful, so Park questions if this is how he says thank you, to which he tells him to support him from now, as Yisu pulls of his tie while Shin's words come back, saying there's only one thing he's worried about, which is if the other person who stabbed Dogyeong will stay sane. As they start squaring off against Yisu, Park remarks that he's only targeting Ghost and his movements have become rough, as Yisu knocks his chin back with the handle of his knife and grabs his hair, telling him to get up because he won't kill him as easily as he thinks. He dodges another attack from Park, who says they should retreat now since Baek Yisu is impossible for them at the moment. But Ghost says he can't do that since he can't leave anything behind before retreating, and asks if he doesn't think so as well before rushing towards Yisu and clashing blades, saying they don't leave anything behind. Yisu knocks him away, but he uses his threads to make him trip back and runs forward again to attack, but Yisu kicks him away mid-air and accidentally drops the lighter, as Park frustratingly says even that didn't work. Bloodied, Ghost picks up his dagger again as Yisu pulls the threads away before they clash again, and Ghost notices something on the ground. He looks at the lighter questioningly and says fire before remembering G1 walking into the burning wreckage and sacrificing himself. He triumphantly says this will do and fires it up, saying they should burn everything up and madly declaring that he won't leave anything behind. Dogyeong remarks that it's burning really well and wonders how much it would cost since the Oyama and father ordered him to not touch it, but it's probably Shogo who'll do anything for money, asking him if this is the picture he wanted to paint. The boy says he'd never thought he'd be able to see something like this, to which Dogyeong asks if he isn't working a bit too globally since he's from North Korea. He answers that there's frequent flooding in Hamyongdo. No matter how hard one tries, all the vegetables will be washed away at the end. When you're hungry like that, this'll be the only thing you see. Some guys are willing to do that and go crazy before killing each other, which is why he hated it. Shin asks if this was the only one they brought here, to which Dogyeong answers that they've probably set a lot more of these up in circulation and is probably planning to join the one sink with them. But there's no way they're going to let that happen, which is why they should burn it all without leaving anything behind. One sink, Chief Jang and Oyama Shogo. Ghost says he's going to incinerate everything, so Yisu tells him to give it to him. So he asks if this is important and should return to him before running away, telling him to come get in that case. Angered, Yisu picks up 2 blades and rushes after him, seeing which Park says they've got a problem. Ghost remembers asking the team leader if they've got anything to burn it up with, so he'd answered that they're in Russia, which is known as the Vodka Nation, and can find this everywhere. Running, Ghost remarks that they can find it over there and beckons Yisu to come after him before closing the elevator doors, which Yisu angrily punches, wondering what he's trying to do. Ghost wearily remembers how Chief Jang had told him that he could never be a legend like Baek Yisu since he's a ghost that isn't meant to be recognized. He stumbles out the elevator and questions what makes him different from Yisu. Picking up a bottle of vodka, he says they're all the same because when they receive the order, they kill. spilling it all over the floor. He remarks that the number of people they've killed probably exceeds the number of members they have and asks Yisu if he still thinks of himself as a legend, telling him that they're all the same, he can't be the only one who is different, which is why they should get burned together. As Yisu walks out the elevator, Ghost remarks that he must be crazy as well to just walk into this burning mess. He asks if he's doing this because his brother almost died, so Yisu furiously rushes forward and tells him to shut up. Ghost whips out his threads, saying they're all going to die and are going to burn to death. He throws a chair at him, which he dodges and remarks in surprise that he tied it up with his silver threads. Before stumbling after getting his leg tied by a thread, he smashes away the battle flying at his face and recognizes the alcohol before throwing his daggers away and saying that this is enough with the stupid tricks. He tells him to stop hiding and come out before Ghost suddenly appears over him and throws the lighter down. Dogyeong calls Chairman Lee and says everything is going well on their end, but he alarmingly answers that there's a fire. Surprised, he asks if he could see it from there, but he tells him that there's a fire at Shogo's hotel here, and he's still inside as well as Baek Yisu, while watching the burning building in shock with Cha. Watching the lighter in shock, Yisu wonders if the alcohol he threw just now was intended for this and tries to throw it away, but his arm starts burning before Ghost rushes at him, remarking that he can burn too in surprise before disarming him. Yisu tries to land an attack, but fails, seeing which Ghost mockingly says his moves are getting sluggish and asks how the burning pain feels, to which Yisu pulls him forward and smashes him down, asking if he thinks this little pain is worth something, and that he knows the burning pain well enough from that day until now. He's been burning continuously. He throws Ghost against the wall and asks if it's painful before kicking him in the face and saying it's so painful that it makes him want to die, which is why he made up his mind to swallow up all of them, so they're going to burn together in this pit of burning hatred. Ghost sluggishly gets up and asks if it isn't a bit stuffy in here before picking up a chair and smashing it at the wall, saying it's probably because of the lack of oxygen. Yisu asks what's going on, so he calls it a backdraft, explaining that if there's a fire in an enclosed space, something about the oxygen in the air will. He gleefully stops and tells Yisu that he'll soon find it out for himself. As he finally breaks the glass, hot air rushes at Yisu's face all of a sudden, while Dogyeong tells Shin to get them there faster and tries calling Yisu. Meanwhile, Yisu slowly gets up and picks up the phone, telling Dogyeong that he's in the hotel right now, but he declines and says the guy who killed him is still here. Dogyeong says he almost ended up like that 6 years ago, which is why he fled to Korea. He's seen many people trapped in the pit, wandering in anger, and thought that he shouldn't end up like that madman, but if Yisu dies, then he'll definitely go mad like that guy, which is why he shouldn't get swallowed up by his anger. Yisu tells him that there's a place behind the hotel from where the logistic vehicles enter, so he'll go out that way. Dogyeong says he'll come get him from there, and as he leaves, Ghost hurriedly gets up from the burning rabble and asks where Baek Yisu is, saying they were supposed to burn together before Park walks up to him and asks where he went. Ghost answers that he was looking for him, but he got away. Park angrily asks if he did all this, but Ghost ignores him and says he couldn't have gotten far since he was injured as well, because opportunities like this don't come twice. Park asks if he's crazy and says he came to find him under orders and should have done that because Ghost, or rather Choi Yojun, it's a blackout from now. As Yisu wearily walks out, someone asks why he came out now since they've been waiting for him for far too long, as he's cornered by Shogo and Chief Jang, who says it's been a long time. Chief Jang remarks that they meet again, so Yisu asks if he's convinced he's not Dogyeong, to which he answers that from the moment they crossed paths with each other in the annex, it was always a gut feeling, but now it's turned to certainty. Yisu asks if he remembers what he said back then. Killing one guy won't be the end of it, so if they meet again, he'd promise to give him an answer to what he'll do next. Jang puts his glasses back into his coat and answers what the answer is in that case before the two rush at each other at once. Jang swoops under Yisu's attack, so he kicks him, but that gets dodged, so he pummels him in the face, seeing which he says he really is Baek Yisu. because only he could handle this kind of situation, so Yisu pounces on him and tells him to stop fooling around, after which Jang slashes him with his blades and says his movements become too obvious if he uses his strength recklessly, calling it straightforward because emotions cloud. Nabu remarks that he underestimated Yisu, which was a clear misjudgment on his part, as a result of which he lost and returned as a disgrace, but being alive gives them an opportunity. There is no next time, so he'll give his all, which is the determination of someone who disgraced the Oyama, the determination of Onagazuka Nobuhiro. 5 minutes before the fight, noticing Nabu's shaking arm, Shogo had told him not to push himself and given Kaido a gun after confirming that his other arm was working fine. As police and firefighter cars crowd around the hotel, Shin remarks that they're all here and questions if it's completely blocked, as Dogyeong wonders if Jang's side used force and asks Lee if Yisu managed to escape, to which he answers that they're waiting for him, but he hasn't come out yet. Dogyeong says that the police is also situated in the front, and the main entrance is sealed, so it might be difficult for them to join them, so they should just get out. Lee asks about Yisu, so he answers that he told him to head out through the back way, and is heading there, to which Lee says that side might be blocked too. Dogyeong answers that they're going to have to force their way through before Cha takes the call, and says they won't accept that decision, saying she'll help them, so he should secure the exit on their end. He answers that'll have to result in a direct confrontation, so she asks if he isn't confident, and tells him that Zealan along with the rest are on their way right now, which is why they'll have to carefully handle it since it'll take some time, and tells him to not worry about them since the president brought some reinforcements, so Dogyeong agrees and says he'll leave it to them. As Shin whirls their car the other way, a patrolman tells someone that the dragon has arrived and is heading towards the back, hearing which Wang says they should properly welcome their guests. Jang tells Yisu that he really is amazing, so he asks why they're targeting him before Kaido fires a gun as Jang angrily whirls around, and Shogo says they got bored watching, asking Yisu if they shouldn't wrap it up now, as Yisu notices the bullet wound on his torso. Shogo tells Kaido that he can see now why he and Nabu lost. But it doesn't matter if they lose, because no matter how many times his arms and legs break, he can get back up again and again. As long as he can get adjusted, he can rush at him countless times, handing him a gun. He says he can still move this arm. As Jang and Yisu are sparring, he barely dodges an attack, and remarks he would have lost his head if he moved a second too late. Yisu is already heavily injured, so he should have the upper hand in terms of physical strength, but that isn't the case. He tells Yisu that he isn't an easy opponent and would have taught him better if he had known this would happen, to which he tells him to stop spouting crap because he shouldn't have made them like that in the first place, and starts asking Jang what he takes them before suddenly getting interrupted as Kaido fires a bullet at his torso. Wang remarks that they said the world is changing, that's why they need a new balance and new characters to match it. But what they do now is no different from what was done 15 years ago, which is why they can't change anything. Whether it's the past or present, they're still trying to set fire on each other. As the car turns the corner and Dogyeong steps out, Wang says he seriously can't get used to it, no matter how many times he's seen it, and asks who he is this time, the intelligent Baek Yisu, or the director, Baek Dogyeong. He answers that he would have normally taken this as a joke, but doesn't have the mood for it right now, telling him to get lost or they can just show themselves in. Wang remarks that he'd thought they'd at least be shown some appreciation for waiting so long, but it seems like he's in a hurry, which Dogyeong agrees to since there are people waiting for him. Suddenly, they hear a gunshot and turn towards where the sound came from before Dogyeong angrily calls Yisu's name and rushes towards Wang before a party of cars arrive behind them, and Wang says she's here too as Zealan steps out of a car and asks how they could start the part without her, telling them to just watch as she clears the way and takes care of this fake Chinwon. As Kaido fires the gun, Shogo tells him to finish it and to quickly try this one more time, so he shakily starts firing more rounds, but Yisu ducks behind a logistics car as Shogo tells Kaido to aim carefully this time since he's got one bullet left, but Jang kicks the gun away from his hand and asks Shogo if he's gone crazy using a gun here. asking if he didn't already tell him that this isn't Japan. Shogo asks if he feels guilty towards him for not letting them use a gun, so Jang takes his out and angrily says he's going to be the one who kills them at the very least, so Shogo tells him to go ahead and take care of him since he doesn't care about trash like him anyway before Dogyeong arrives, remarking that they can't call his younger brother trash. He says this is why he told father that this trash must get disposed of before asking Yisu who bullied him and who he should kill first. Shogo madly remarks that the real deal is actually different and calls him reckless before asking how he got in since Chinwon should have been guarding the entrance, to which he answers that he's busy because of being caught up in a family feud, which is why he needs to just focus here so that they can handle things amongst themselves. Gu asks Wang why he let Tison in since they're far superior in numbers, but he answers that he understood Director Gu's words. If they tolerate some sacrifices and drag them into a war of attrition, they'll have the upper hand, and asks if his calculation of that sacrifice include his own life. He says he's still injured, to which Wang remarks that he never expected much from him anyway and asks what their subordinates can learn from him, asking Zeolon if he's right. She tells everyone to not step forward as Wang says the White Lotus he nurtured is coming after him as she rushes at him. He dodges an attack and says she'll stick her knife in his head on top of that, but the attack's too straightforward and there won't be much progress if that's the case before the car's headlights suddenly turn on, blinding him as she swipes at him. He barely manages to dodge, but Zeolon presses on and keeps cornering him, calling it a golden opportunity. He dodges and says she's improved a lot before she inwardly tells her to not give him any openings. He says her eagerness got in the way though, and he always said her impatience was her problem, kicking her dagger away before punching her in the face as she realizes her mistake before starting to get pummeled from all directions and falling down. Nabu angrily steps forward and tells Dogyeong to give his all before Shin asks what's wrong with him and says he'll deal with him, while the boy picks up Kaido's gun and asks how a normal member of society is allowed to carry this around, telling him to just lie down and behave to get him to overlook it. Jang watches Dogyeong stepping forward and says the situation is getting complicated, so he should secure Yisu first, but sees that he's disappeared before Yisu pounces on him from above and the two clash blades. Dogyeong asks Shogo's lackeys what they're doing and tells them to come at him, hearing which they angrily rush at him, but he takes his dagger out and swiftly starts slashing them all one after another before calling one disgusting for rushing at him from behind. A guard looking from afar remarks that he's really fast and easily takes them all on despite his movements being simple. He rushes at Dogyeong and asks what he can do against these numbers, so he tells them to stop it because he's busy before a man says he told him to step aside, and effortlessly throws the guard away before Lee stops him and tells him to go to Baek Yisu since they'll take care of the situation from now. As they're fighting, Jang says Yisu's movements are slower than before and kicks him in the stomach before Dogyeong slashes him in the face, angrily remarking that he finally managed to land a blow. The wings of a once promising crane have been broken for a long time. It was a structure that placed Chairman Lee Seung-hak at the pinnacle once, but those swords have long been broken and the teeth have worn down. A crane standing precariously with its broken wings, that is now the state of Lee Seung-min's talent. The lackeys remark that this guy is from Tison and ask where he's going before the man starts pummeling them one after one, and his partner swiftly slashes through them with his dagger, as even on those curved wings, new feathers are growing. It will become even sharper and grow better wings. The wings that came back after enduring the pain, they will be bigger and stronger as the composition of Lee Seung-min begins to flap its wings. The guards angrily ask where they came from before the man. Jang Si-young slams him away as the other one, Oh Gujun, cuts one's arm off. The guard says he'll take care of the chairman, and they decide to leave the rest to the two of them as they ask themselves how they found these two men. The chairman instructed them to create a new 9-blade, so they went around the country to find talented people, among whom the first one was Jang Si-young. He was a professional boxer until he lost an eye in an accident during sparring ahead of the game when the opposing player threw a punch bare-handed, which was how his career was over. The chairman must have heard the story somewhere too. The opponent was Ru Taehyung. He asks if he's aiming for revenge, to which Lee answers that the one he wants revenge against is actually in front of him, Ogujun, the son of Myung Hwan, the first disciple of the former Nine Blades. Shin wonders if those are the two new guys and wonders if Boris is still busy, which is a shame since he's been studying English a bit, dodging an attack. He tells Nabu to take it easy and lie down, to which he answers that he'll actually die if he does that. A guard grabs Shin from behind, after which Nabu strikes his axe, but he rolls over and dodges, telling Nabu that even if he's drugged that's too much before the guards all surround him. Dogyeong asks Yisu if he's alright and if that's the boss since it's the first time he's seen him in person, telling Jang that he would have been immediately done for if he had crossed paths with him earlier while flipping him a finger. Dogyeong asks if everyone who meets him always considers him to be a god. He asks Yisu how he's doing, so he clutches his wound and says he's fine, so he'll endure it. Seeing this, Dogyeong tells him to just sit there since he'll be done with this quickly. As the two start fighting, he remarks that he can't believe he's using that blade and asks if this really is the level of a thug. Dogyeong uses his knee to attack before kicking him in his face, remarking that he's landed 2 blows with this. The two jump back and Jang remarks that he turned out to be stronger than he'd thought before stopping, as Shogo remarks that it doesn't matter who it is. Dogyeong angrily asks what he's doing, and if he's gone crazy before he lifts his sword over Yisu, saying that Tison will become the grave of 2 brothers. In Baek Roman 20, federal informant Punchkick alias Baek Yisu becomes embroiled in a dangerous web of deception with his twin brother Baek Dogyeong, who leads a criminal gang. Betrayed by the gang, Yisu assumes his brother's identity to infiltrate the organization as an undercover federal agent. Eager to know what happens next, right? But before we move to the story, let's have some fun with a trivia question. What's the most memorable friendship or camaraderie played in a manga, manhwa, or manhwa for you? Drop your answers in the comments below, and who knows, we might just bring you a recap of your favorite. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for the wildest ride. Shogo raised his sword to attack Yisu, but Baek Dogyeong intervened just in time. Dogyeong's sudden appearance caught Shogo off guard, and he warned Yisu that fighting would lead to tragedy. Dogyeong skillfully blocked Shogo's attack and pushed him away from Yisu. He teased Shogo about needing a lesson in their native language, hinting at his own superiority. Angered by the mockery, Shogo tried to strike back, but Dogyeong dodged effortlessly. Seeing the situation escalate, Dogyeong realized he needed to be careful, knowing he couldn't help Yisu, who was badly injured. Meanwhile, outside, a blade with Korean characters carried a message about the beauty of flowers regardless of their type. As the building was engulfed in flames, Wang Hao watched the fire, seeing it as a field of blossoming flowers. Turning to Shulan, who looked visibly battered, he remembered their shared past, and the moment he gave her a blade, hoping she would flourish like those blooms. Placing the same blade on Shulan's shoulder, Wang questioned if she had fulfilled his hopes for her growth. Amidst the chaos, a convoy of vehicles arrived, signaling the arrival of Nine Blades Choi Chin-ho. Respected and feared, Choi wasted no time in addressing Wang, reminding him of a debt between them. Ordering his men to step aside and deal with other matters, Choi faced off against Wang, who welcomed the confrontation, ready to confront his past actions. With a history tainted by the death of the former captain of the Nine Blades at his hands, Wang stood firm, prepared to face whatever revenge Choi sought. In their duel, both fighters showed equal skill, their attacks unable to land on each other. Wang questioned Choi's supposed improvement, only to be met with a suggestion of his own decline. Undeterred, Wang retrieved his blade decorated with flowers, reigniting the battle with a renewed determination. As the clash intensified, Wang found an opening, delivering a decisive blow with his blade, slicing Choi. However, his triumph was short-lived as Choi swiftly retaliated, landing a powerful punch on Wang. Amidst the skirmish, Wang questioned Choi's motives, wondering if revenge was his sole purpose. Yet Choi's response hinted at a deeper agenda, suggesting their inadequacy for the newer generation's challenges. Meanwhile, a young boy valiantly defended against Nobuhiro, who refused to yield despite sustaining significant injuries. In the midst of the chaos, Yaksha emerged, instructing the young boy to assist Yisu. Sensing the impending confrontation, Nobuhiro challenged Yaksha, seeking a showdown. Their clash ensued, with Yaksha delivering a devastating blow, leaving Nobuhiro reeling from the impact. Yaksha's strike appears to have knocked Nobuhiro unconscious. Meanwhile, Choi, sensing the commotion, asks Wang about the noise. Wang, noticing the disturbance, casually comments that it does sound lively. Wang then jokingly tells Choi that with each word, he sounds younger. However, Choi explains that it's not about age, but about the younger generation getting closer to their goals with each spoken word. Wang gives Choi one last chance, urging him to give up everything he has, but Choi brushes it off with a light-hearted attitude. Soon after, they engage in another fight. This time, Wang keeps the upper hand, skillfully blocking every attack Choi throws at him. Not only does Wang defend well, but he also takes advantage of every opportunity to counterattack, gradually wearing down Choi's defenses. Eventually, Wang seizes an opening and strikes back against Choi's signature move, knocking him unconscious as he falls to the ground. When Choi wakes up, he acknowledges Wang's skill in drawing blood and says that the real battle has just begun. Choi proposes they continue their battle, prompting Wang to remind Choi that he must demonstrate resilience and reveal the true prowess of the 9 blades. As they gear up for another round, the sudden report of a revolver interrupts their confrontation, signaling the arrival of the police. An officer quickly queries about the whereabouts of Jang Seongho, and the scene swiftly transitions to where Yisu is situated. There, Seongho finds himself locked in combat with Shogo, who effortlessly outmaneuvers him, reveling in his superiority. Seongho recognizes the cunning nature of Shogo's blade and resolves to block his attacks to regain control. However, his attempts end in failure as a newcomer intervenes, seizing Seongho and rebuking him for wielding what he deems to be an inferior blade. Shogo notices the arrival of another participant and questions their allegiance, only to learn they are affiliated with Yaksha. Meanwhile, Dogyeong finds himself embroiled in a difficult struggle against another adversary, while his opponent realizes Seongho's dominance. Acknowledging the danger to their leader, Seongho vows to return, determined to showcase his true abilities. Seongho then proceeds to slide and attack Shogo on the legs, but he is not used to this style of fighting, but as soon as Seongho is able to see Shogo's movements, he is fine. Seongho then attacks Shogo, but gets blocked. Though this time, Seongho notices that Shogo is left-handed, and so he decides to make him use his left hand to generate all the power while he will attack him from the left side. But the plan doesn't go accordingly as Shogo strikes his sword with left hand and grabs Seongho with the other. An unexpected event then unfolds as Yisu gets back up, makes his way to Shogo and proceeds to stab him with his blade, while mentioning that he has decided to kill Shogo. After being stabbed, Shogo bursts into hysterical laughter and questions Yisu's awareness of his actions. Meanwhile, Dogyeong watches as Shogo cuts off his own finger in response to Yisu's attack. Impressed by Shogo's resilience and swordsmanship skills, Dogyeong recognizes him as a formidable adversary within Uyama. Enduring such an injury and still fighting is undeniably impressive. While Dogyeong is distracted, the other man takes advantage and kicks him forcefully, knocking him to the ground. The attacker then heads to a deserted warehouse where he meets Lee and another person. When asked about his identity, the scene shifts to a flashback, revealing the man's visit to Rugasaki in the hospital. In the flashback, the man stands before Rugasaki, holding a bloodied blade. Rugasaki asks if he has been following Shogo. The man explains that he didn't specifically track Shogo, but is aligned with an organization called Uyama. He reveals that his allegiance comes from sharing ideals with Rugasaki and supporting Uyama's cause. The man then reveals to Rugasaki that after he left, Shogo took over for Kashira, and a lot has happened since then. After Rugasaki's absence, Uyama had to be broken several times, and it had become stronger as a result. So now, the one recognized by Kashira is without a doubt Shogo. Moreover, after Shogo took over the position of Kashira, Oyama has indeed shown exceptional growth. Meanwhile, in the present, the man introduces himself as Hainzawa Gunji, who is the representative of Chairman Tetsuji Uyama. He then tells manager Sung Ho that Tetsuji wishes to speak to him directly. Hainzawa then asks Shogo and the others to stop fighting for a moment. Tetsuji immediately apologizes to Sung Ho for the somewhat impolite greeting on their first meeting. Tetsuji then asks Sung Ho to choose his words wisely before speaking, or else he will have to make some calculations with Tetsuji directly. Tetsuji then reveals that Dogyeong and Shogo are both his beloved sons, even though there is discord in the family currently. Tetsuji then suggests disbanding and parting ways and offers ownership of the hotel as a gesture for Sung Ho's project. Tetsuji further mentions that from now on, the affairs there will be the independent actions of Shogo and Dogyeong and not Uyama. As Shogo expresses disappointment to his father, Tetsuji tenderly reassures him that his love remains steadfast, unwavering through every trial. He emphasizes that his affection for Shogo as a father has never faltered, even for a moment. Transitioning from familial sentiments to matters of allegiance within Uyama, Tetsuji challenges Shogo to satisfy him not as a son, but as a member of their organization. Meanwhile, Commissioner Jo Wonho perceives the unfolding events with keen interest, sensing a shift in dynamics. He prepares to mobilize the police forces when suddenly Hainzawa intervenes, urging Jo Wonho to reconsider. The events of that day ignite various emotions within each participant: feelings of shame, burning hatred, unspoken grievances, and smoldering remnants of conflict. These emotions become the fuel for a new fire, symbolizing the dawn of a new era. The torch, a beacon of this transformation, signals to all that the flame of change has been ignited. 2 years ago, a convoy of cars stops near a river, drawing attention to the chairman standing by the water. Getting out of one car, a man approaches the chairman, confirming that preparations are complete. The chairman suggests they head towards Yisu. Fast forward to the present. 2 months after a tragic hotel fire, Commissioner Jo Wonho addresses the public, acknowledging the recent disaster. He addresses the growing speculation and unfounded rumors surrounding the incident, which falsely attribute it to clashes between criminal groups, causing unnecessary fear among the people. Jo explains that after a thorough investigation, it's difficult to link the fire to conflicts between organizations. He reassures the community by announcing the arrest of the main suspect involved in the incident. Jo then addresses one of the journalists' questions and mentions that Seoul is currently facing an emergency situation threatened by violent crimes. Therefore, in response to such acts of terrorism that threaten the safety of the citizens, they will initiate a special security operation named One Sink. It involves the pre-deployment of forces to key locations to prevent violence and is a special security operation carried out by the combined forces of the military and the police to protect the citizens. Later, we see one of the members of One Sink operation beating a thug boss and knocking him out while assigning the boss role to another one of his subordinates. The One Sink member then tells the newly assigned thug boss that they will be bringing stash every month, and that he will act like a currency exchange, and asks the thug to just convert it to money whenever they bring the stash. Later, a man is explaining to the others about the Operation One Sink and reveals that the two dominant forces left in Seoul are One Sink and Tisan. He further reveals that One Sink tolerates even illegal activities by its affiliated organizations, and as a result the scale of income varies significantly. The rival organizations seem to be the problem for them, but the strategies for overcoming them are being discussed. Soon, Dogyeong mentions that this time Tisan will move separately, leading another attendee to ask Dogyeong if he has a plan in his mind. Dogyeong explains that if Ilhak is handling absorption and persuasion, then Tisan will do the pruning. Moreover, he mentions that it is not a plan, rather they have already started. Meanwhile, at Gangnam Apgujeong, a bald man stealthily watches over One Sink when suddenly Yisu appears behind him and knocks him down. Meanwhile, at the meeting, Dogyeong mentions that he already instructed Yisu to go there, but another attendee disagrees, saying it's too impulsive. However, Dogyeong explains that Yisu is not alone as he's following suit. Another attendee points out Lisu's recent severe injuries, but Dogyeong insists that the injuries are not a problem. It's Lisu's anger that needs an outlet. They need a place for Yisu to vent his anger. Back at Gangnam Abgujeong, Yisu instructs the bald man to make a call to whoever he wants. Lee Hyun, the self-appointed operational staff of Tisen Union, announces that there will be a special lecture from now on. He begins by stating that he has first-hand battle experience and is knowledgeable about the subject. Gujun stands up angrily to challenge Lee's credibility, but Jang Seong quickly calms him down, whispering that it will be interesting. Seong then asks Lee about their ranks. Lee reveals that Gujun is ranked B, while Seong has been promoted from rank B to B+. Seong then flatters Lee, praising his extensive knowledge of the past. Soon, Choi enters the room and Lee promptly reveals his rank as well. Lee mentions that judging by Choi's past achievements in Seoul, his rank is measured as a plus. Soon, Choi reveals that their district will move on to Gangnam. Shortly after, Dogyeong arrives there as well and Lee is quick to notice that and begins mentioning his rank as well. The scene then shifts to Shogo taking place in the middle of a meeting where he mentions that there will be a new Secretary General assigned. In a flashback event, it is shown that Tetsuji asks Hainzawa to stay in Korea and to be his eyes. Moreover, he asks him to join Shogo in his quest and help him out, which is why in the present, Hainzawa declares himself as the new Secretary General. Hainzawa is a rank B Uyama Group Director who will now be assisting Shogo Oyama, who is ranked as a plus and is One Sync's creating subordinate organization. Soon, Wai Chang-ho, One Sync International Trade in charge of import and export, inquires as to what all this is about. Other than them, Ku Changjun, member of One Sync International Trade Finance Officer, and Wang Hao, One Sync head of Southwestern Branch, who is ranked S, are also present there. Later, in Tisen HQ, Yisu makes his return and presents a briefcase containing business papers in which it is mentioned that the business has been transferred to their names. Yisu then comments that he is the only one going on about the revenge and mentions that none of the other members of Tisen appear to care about it anymore. Gujun then pulls out his blade and places it by Yisu's throat as he is a bit skeptical with Yisu after hearing what he just said. Shortly after, Dogyeong makes his entry and stops them from fighting. He then shifts his focus to Yisu and appears to be delighted for his return. However, Yisu begins to speak to Dogyeong, mentioning that he could have killed them all during the hotel fire as that was their objective. Yisu even expresses his desire to have done so. Suddenly, Dogyeong becomes furious at Yisu's disrespectful tone. He loads his punch and sends Yisu flying with a powerful blow, causing him to fall to the ground. Baek Dogyeong, the current head of Tisen, holds the rank of S+. On the other hand, Baek Yisu is a former member of the HID Special Task Forces and NK Infiltration Task Force, and he currently holds the rank of X, making him the undisputed pinnacle of Seoul and the shadow boss of Tisen. Dogyeong expresses his disappointment in his brother Yisu for his behavior and criticizes him. Yisu retaliates by throwing a hard punch at Dogyeong, and despite Choi's attempts to intervene, the two continue to fight. Dogyeong remarks to Yisu that he hasn't been in a fight for a long time, to which Yisu challenges him to try. Just then, a girl arrives and reminds them that they are blood brothers and shouldn't be hurting each other, especially after facing death so closely in recent events. Meanwhile, Guju, Seong, and Choi sneak away and leave the scene. In another scene, Tegamuto, the governor of the Osaka branch and Tetsuji's right-hand man, manages to bypass the guards and enters to meet Tetsuji. After greeting Tetsuji, Muto reveals that he has successfully conquered Osaka in the name of Uyama. As they play a game of stones, Muto unexpectedly mentions something to Tetsuji. Muto reveals that if he wins, then he will leave Uyama. Tetsuji asks him the reason, and in response, Matu mentions that he will be leaving for the sake of his son and his pupil. Matu is aware that Shogo and Rugasaki are fighting on Korean soil, and so as the teacher of Shogo, Matu has decided to take Shogo's side. However, Tetsuji does not wish for Matu to leave Uyama and soon proceeds to tie the game as they have no stones left anymore. While Tetsuji is trying his hardest to stop Matu from leaving, he is responding to every comment with cunningness, which eventually leads Tetsuji to rage. He then proceeds to beat the board with his fist, which results in the stones getting scattered all over the room. Since the game is not in effect anymore due to Tetsuji's rage, Matu mentions that he has won and soon leaves. Meanwhile, in Yeoksamdong Gangnam, the boss lady asks Seong if he has come all the way from Ilhak, which he confirms. Seong then begins to pitch his offer to the boss lady and starts mentioning that his gang will offer her protection, but soon gets intervened by the boss lady, who mentions that she has 3 problems with his organization. The first problem that she mentions is that they are rude, and as soon as Seong begins to explain, she interrupts him once again and mentions that the second problem is that there's no merit. Soon, Yisu makes his entry and proceeds to show his dominance when suddenly the boss lady mentions that the third problem is that they are aware of who Yisu is. Yisu understands the situation and begins to prepare by removing his suit. Seong also stands up, and the two of them engage in a fight with the boss lady's men, who have surrounded them from all directions. Unexpectedly, Dogyeong arrives and sees that Yisu has started another fight. However, when he confronts Yisu, Yisu reveals that he wasn't the one who initiated the violence this time. Dogyeong then draws his blade, indicating that he will assist Yisu in defeating the boss lady's men. Dogyeong and Yisu manage to defeat all of the boss lady's men. Afterwards, Dogyeong explains to Yisu that his plan is indeed correct, but it comes with serious consequences. He mentions that as the official boss of Tisen, Yisu will be a target for everyone, and eliminating one adversary would only lead to another taking their place. Dogyeong emphasizes that despite Yisu being the boss, they are still an organization, and they need a leader who can unite and inspire others rather than one who brings conflict and violence. Meanwhile, in another location, Ilhak's boss, Lee Senigman, visits an old organization to ask for a favor. While waiting for the organization's boss, Lee sits down for tea. The person attending to him asks where he is from, and Lee responds that he is from Ilhak. Soon the organization's boss's son arrives there and begins to talk with Lee in a disrespectful tone. Hearing this, Gujun barges in the room and instructs the boss's son to be careful with his words. However, the boss's son does not appear to be aware of how strong the Ilhaks are. In response to that, Gujun proceeds to position his blade on the boss's son's throat and asks him if he wants to find out how scary Ilhaks are. Lee then quickly asks Gujun to move his knife away, as he is not there for violent reasons at all, and Gujun decides to obey. Suddenly, the boss's son proceeds to attack Gujun when suddenly his father, Song Taeju, arrives there shouting at him to stop. Taeju then shifts his focus to Lee, who he happens to recognize, and greets him in a respectful manner. Moreover, Lee also happens to recognize Taeju from the past. The two then begin to engage in a conversation where Lee mentions to Taeju that he has a favor to ask of him. Taeju, on the other hand, reveals how his organization has been living by hanging on the back of the Han Heseong organization and surviving, although they haven't had business. But Taeju believed that Lee would come one day. Taeju then mentions to Lee about paying him back and proceeds to request him to help his organization, making Lee confused as he was the one who needed a favor from Taeju's organization in the first place. On the other hand, Matu makes his way outside the hospital to meet with Rugasaki and appears to be annoyed by the fact that it has been raining. Matu then approaches the gatekeepers and strikes him down using a kick as he falls on the glass door, shattering it. Matu enters the hospital where a large group of men surrounds him. However, Matu effortlessly defeats several of them, realizing that Rugasaki's men are no match for his skills, and he could defeat each of them easily. Suddenly, Ha Jin-woong, also known as the immovable Yaksha, arrives and questions Matu if he is affiliated with Uyama. Matu responds that he is not with Uyama, but then asks if they would fight if he were associated with Uyama.